Paradise Lost by John Milton, narrated by Kusi. Book 1. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with the loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed, in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos, or if Zion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeneid mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like setst, brooding on the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this, the great argument, I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first what cause moved our grandparents, in that happy state, favoured of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator, and transgress his will. For one restraint, lords of the world besides. Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? The infernal serpent. He it was whose guile, stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind, what time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid, aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equalled the Most High. If he opposed, and with ambitious aim, against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven and battle proud, with vain attempt, him the almighty power hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion, down to the bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire. Who durst defy the omnipotent to arms? 9 times the space that measures day and night, to mortal men he, with his horrid crew, lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded, though immortal. But his doom reserved him to more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Round he throws his baleful eyes, that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. At once, as far as angels can, he views the dismal situation waste and wild. A dungeon horrible, on all sides round, as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes, that comes to all, but torture without end still urges, and a fiery deluge fed with ever-burning sulphur unconsumed. Such place eternal justice has prepared for those rebellious, here their prison ordained in utter darkness, and their portion set, as far removed from God and light of heaven as from the centre thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell! There the companions of his fall, overwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire. He soon discerns, and weltering by his side, one next himself in power, and next in crime, long after known in Palestine, and named Beelzebub, to whom the archenemy, and thence in heaven called Satan, and bold words, breaking the horrid silence, thus began, If thou beest he, but oh, how fallen, how changed from him who, in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads though bright. If he who mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope and hazard in the glorious enterprise, joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin, into what pit thou seest, from what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. Until then who knew the force of those dire arms? Yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change, though changed in outward lustre, that fixed mind and high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contentions brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that durst dislike his reign, and me preferring his utmost power, with adverse power opposed in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage, never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome. That glory shall never his wrath or might extort from me, to bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and deify his power, who from the terror of this arm so late doubted his empire. That were low indeed, that were an ignominy and shame beneath this downfall, since by fate the strength of gods and this empyreal substance cannot fail, since through experience of this great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war, irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs and in the excess of joy sole reigning holds the tyranny of heaven. So spake the apostate angel, though in pain vaunting aloud, but racked with deep despair, and him thus answered soon his bold compeer. O Prince, O Chief of many throned powers, that led the embattled seraphim to war under thy conduct, and in dreadful deeds fearless endangered heaven's perpetual king, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength or chance or fate, too well I see and rue the dire event that, with sad overthrow and foul defeat, hath lost us heaven and all this mighty host, in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigour soon returns, though all our glory extinct, and happy state here swallowed up in endless misery. But what if he, our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered such force as ours, have left us this our spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls, by right of war, whatever his business be, here in the heart of hell, to work in fire, or do his errands in the gloomy deep? What can it then avail, though yet we feel strength undiminished, or eternal being, to undergo eternal punishment. Whereto with speedy words the arch-fiend replied, "Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering, but of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will, whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labour must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which ofttimes may succeed so as perhaps shall grieve him, if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see, the angry victor hath recalled his ministers of vengeance and pursuit back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail, shot after us in storm, overblown hath laid the fiery surge that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps hath spent his shafts, and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not slip the occasion, whether scorn or satiate fury yield it from our foe. Seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light, save what the glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Thither left us tend from off the tossing of these fiery waves. There rest, if any rest can harbour there, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss, how repair, how overcome this dire calamity. What reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not, what resolution from despair. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, with head uplift above the wave and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides, prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating, many a rood in bulk, as huge as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian or earthborn, that warned on Jove, Briareos or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that sea-beast Leviathan, which God of all his works created hugest that swim the ocean stream, him haply slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-foundered skiff, deeming some island off, as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea, and wished morn delays. So stretched out huge in length and arch-fiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor ever thence had risen, or heaved his head, but that the will and the high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with reiterated crimes he might heap on himself damnation, while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace, and mercy, shown on man by him seduced, but on himself treble confusion, wrath, and vengeance poured. Forthwith upright he rears from off the pool, his mighty stature. On each hand the flames driven backwards slope their pointing spires, and rolled in billows, leave in the midst of a horrid veil. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lights, if it were land that ever burned with solid, as the lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in the hue as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Etna, whose combustible and fueled entrails, thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aids the winds, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stretch and smoke. Such resting found the soul of unblessed feet. Him followed the next mate, both glorying to have scaped the Stygian flood, as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power. Is this the region? This the soil, the clime, said then the lost archangel, this the seat that we must change from heaven? This mournful gloom, for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who now is sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven or hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater? Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here, for his envy will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the obvious pool, and call them not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms, and try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell. So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered, Leader of those armies, bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled. Of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle, when it raged, in all assaults, their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie grovelling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, as we, erewhile, astounded and amazed, no wonder, fallen such a pernicious height. He scarce had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large, and round, behind him cast. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through optic glass the Tuscan artist views. At evening, from the top of Fesol, or in Valdano, to descry new lands, rivers, or mountains in her spotty globe, he spear to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills, to be the mast of some great amarule, were but a wand. He walked with to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure, and the torrid clime smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. Natheless he so endured, till on the beach of that inflamed sea he stood, and called his legions angel forms, who lay entranced thick as autumnal leaves that strow the brooks in Vallombrosa, where the Etrurian shades high overarched embower, or scattered sedge afloat, when with fierce winds Orion armed hath vexed the Red Sea coast, whose waves overthrew Busiris and his Memphian chivalry, while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the safe shore their floating carcasses and broken chariot wheels. So thick bestrown, abject and lost, lay these, covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud that all the hollow deep of hell resounded. Princes, Potentates, if such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have ye chosen this place, after the toil of battle, to repose your wearied virtue, for the ease you find to slumber here, as in the vales of heaven? Or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror, who now beholds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood, with scattered arms and ensigns, till anon his swift pursuers from heaven gates discern the advantage, and descending, tread us down thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf? Awake, arise, or be for ever fallen. They heard, and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, as when men want to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves ere well awake. Nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were, or the fierce pains not feel. Yet to their general's voice they soon obeyed innumerable, as when the potent rod of Amram's son, in Egypt's evil day, waved round the coast, up-called a pitchy cloud of locusts, warping on the eastern wind, that ere the realm of impious Pharaoh hung like night, and darkened all the land of Nile. So numberless were those bad angels seen, hovering on wing under the cope of hell, twixt upper, nether, and surrounding fires, till, as a signal given, the uplifted spear of their great Sultan waving to direct their course, in even balance down they light on the firm brimstone and fill all the plain. A multitude like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins, to pass rain or the Danor, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith from every squadron and each band, the heads and leaders thither haste where stood their great commander, godlike shapes and forms, excelling human, princely dignities, and powers that erst in heaven sat on thrones, though on their names in heavenly records now be no memorial, blotted out and erased by their rebellion from the books of life. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve got them new names, till, wandering over the earth, through God's high sufferance for the trial of man, by falsities and lies the greatest part of mankind they corrupted to forsake God their Creator, and the invisible glory of him that made them to transform off to the image of a brute, adorned with gay religions, full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Then were they known to men by various names, and various idols through the heathen world. Say, muse their names then known, who first, who last, roused from the slumber on that fiery couch, at their great emperor's call, as next in worth came singly, where he stood on the bare strand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. The chief were those who, from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, durst fix their seats, long after, next the seat of God, their altars by his altar, gods adored among the nations round, and durst abide Jehovah, thundering out of Zion, throned between the cherubim, yea, often placed within his sanctuary itself, their shrines, abominations, and with cursed things, his holy rites and solemn feasts profaned, and with their darkness durst affront his lights. First Molech, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unheard that passed through fire, to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Basan, to the stream of utmost Arnon, Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet, thence and black Gehenna called, the type of hell. Next, Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Aroer to Nebo, and the wild of southmost Abiram, in Hesbon and Horonaim, Sion's real, beyond the flowery dale of Sibma, clad with vines, and Eliel to the asphaltic pool. Peor his other name, when he enticed Israel in Sittim on their march from Nile, to do him wanton rites which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged, even to that hill of scandal, by the grove of Molech, homicide, lust hard by hate, till good Josiah drove them thence to hell. With these came they whom, from the bordering flood of old Euphrates to the brook that parts Egypt from Syrian ground, had general names of Baalim and Ashtaroth, those male, these feminine, for spirits, when they please, can either sex assume, or both. So soft and uncompounded is their essence pure, not tried or manacled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbrous flesh, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute their airy purposes, and works of love or enmity fulfill. For those the race of Israel oft forsook, their living strength and unfrequented left his righteous altar, bowing lowly down to bestial gods, and which their heads as low bowed down in battle, sunk before the spear of despicable foes. With these in troop came Astoreth, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, Queen of Heaven, with crescent horns, to whose bright image nightly by the moon Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs. In Sion, also not unsung, where stood her temple on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king whose heart, though large, beguiled by fair idolatresses, fell to idols foul. Thammus came next, behind, whose annual wound in Lebanon allured the Syrian damsels to lament his fate in amorous ditties all a summer's day, while smooth Adonis from his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood of Thammus yearly wounded. The love tale infected Sion's daughters with like heat, whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw, when, by the vision led, his eye surveyed the dark idolatries of alienated Judah. Next came one who mourned in earnest when the captive ark maimed his brute image, head and hands lopped off, in his own temple on the Grunsel edge, where he fell flat and shamed his worshippers. Dagon his name, sea monster, upward man and downward fish, yet had his temple high, reared in Azotus, dreaded through the coast of Palestine, in Gath and Ascalon, and Acharon and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus, on the fertile banks of Abana, and Pharphar, lucid streams. He also against the house of God was bold. Aleppo once he lost and gained a king, Ahaz, his sottish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace for one of Syrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offerings, and adore the gods whom he had vanquished. After these appeared a crew who, under names of old renown, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries abused fanatic Egypt and her priests to seek their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms rather than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection when their borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and in Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox, Jehovah, who, in one night, when he passed from Egypt, marching, equalled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleating gods. Belial came last, then whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love, vice for itself. To him no temple stood or altar smoked, yet who more oft than he, in temples and at altars, when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God? In courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, where the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers. And injury and outrage, and when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial, flown with insolence and wine. Witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when the hospitable door exposed a matron to avoid worse rape. These were the prime in order and in might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned the Ionian gods of Javan's issue held gods, yet confessed later than heaven and earth. Their boasted parents, Titan, heaven's firstborn, with his enormous brood and birthright seized by younger Saturn, he from mightier Jove, his own and Rhea's son, like measure found. So Jove usurping reigned, these first in Crete and Ida known, thence on the snowy top of gold Olympus ruled the middle air, their highest heaven, or on Delphian cliff, or in Dodona, and through all the bounds of Doric land, or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and o'er the Celtic roamed the utmost isles. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such wherein appeared obscure some glimpse of joy to have found their chief, not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast like doubtful hue. But he, his wonted pride, soon recollecting with high words that bore semblance of worth, not substance, gently raised their fainting courage, and dispelled their fears. Then straight commands that, at the warlike sound of trumpets loud and clarions, be upreared his mighty standard. That proud honour claimed Azazel as his right, a cherub tall, who forthwith from the glittering staff unfurled the imperial ensign, which full high advanced, shone like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and golden lustre rich emblazed, seraphic arms and trophies, all the while sonorous metal, blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host upsent a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frighted the reign of chaos and old night. All in a moment through the gloom were seen 10,000 banners rise into the air, with orient colours waving, with them rose a forest huge of spears, and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array of depth immeasurable. Anon they move in perfect phalanx, to the Dorian mood of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised to height of noblest temper, heroes old, arming to battle, and instead of rage, deliberate valour breathed, firm and unmoved with dread of death to fight or foul retreat, nor wanting power to mitigate and swage with solemn touches troubled thoughts, and chase anguish and doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. Thus they, breathing united force with fixed thought, moved on in silence to soft pipes that charmed their painful steps over the burnt soil. And now advanced in view they stand, a horrid front of dreadful length and dazzling arms, in guise of warriors old, and ordered spear and shield, awaiting what command their mighty chief had to impose. He through the armed files darts his experienced eye, and soon traverse the whole battalion views their order due, their visages and stature as of gods, their number last he sums. And now his heart distends with pride, and hardening in his strength, glories for never, since created man, met such embodied force as, named with these, could merit more than that small infantry warred on by cranes, though all the giant brood of Phlegra, with the heroic race, were joined that fought at Thebes and Ilium, on each side mixed with auxiliar gods, and what resounds in fable or romance of Uther's son, begirt with British and Armoric knights. And all who since, baptized or infidel, jousted in Aspremont or Montauban, Damasco or Morocco, or Trebisond, or whom Biserta sent from Afric shore when Charlemagne with all his peerage fell by Fontabia. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observed their dread commander. He, above the rest in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun, new risen, looks through the horizontal misty air, shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon, in dim eclipse, disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations, and with fear of change perplexes monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel, but his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride waiting revenge. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion, to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned forever now to have their lot in pain. Millions of spirits for his fault, immersed of heaven, and from eternal splendours, flung from his revolt, yet faithful how they stood, their glory withered, as when heaven's fire hath scathed the forest oaks or mountain pines, with singed top, their stately growth, though bare, stands on the blasted heath. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bend from wing to wing, and half enclose him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, and thrice, in spite of scorn, tears, such as angels weep, burst forth. At last words interwove with signs found on their way. O myriads of immortal spirits! O powers matchless, but with the Almighty! And that strife was not inglorious, though the event was dire, as this place testifies, and this dire change, hateful to utter. But what power of mind foreseeing or presaging, from the depth of knowledge past or present, could have feared how such united force of gods, how such as stood like these, could ever know repulse. For who can yet believe, though after loss, that all these puissant legions, whose exile hath emptied heaven, shall fail to reascend, self-raised, and repossess their native seat? For me, be witness all the host of heaven. If counsels different or danger shunned by me have lost our hopes, but he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then as one secure, sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent or custom, and his regal state, put forth at full, but still his strength concealed, which tempted our attempt and wrought our fall. Henceforth his might we know, and know our own, so as not either to provoke or dread new war provoked. Our better part remains to work in close design, by fraud or guile, what force effected not, that he, no less at length, from us may find, who overcomes, by force, hath overcome but half his foe. Space may produce new worlds, whereof so rife there went a fame in heaven, that he ere long intended to create, and therein plant a generation whom his choice regard should favour equal to the sons of heaven. Thither, if but to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption thither, or elsewhere, for this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness cover. But these thoughts full counsel must mature. Peace is despaired, for who can think submission? War, then, war open or understood, must be resolved. He spake, and to confirm his words, out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illumed hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms, clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven. There stood a hill not far, whose grisly top belched fire and rolling smoke, the rest entire shone with a glossy scurf, undoubted sign that in his womb was hid metallic ore, the work of sulphur. Thither, winged with speed, a numerous brigade hastened, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe armed, forerun the royal camp, to trench a field or cast a rampart. Mammon led them on. Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in vision beatific. By him, first men also, and by his suggestion taught, ransacked the centre, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth, for treasures better hid. Soon had his crew opened into the hill a spacious wound, and digged out ribs of gold. Let none admire that riches grow in hell, that soil may best deserve the precious bane. And here, let those who boast in mortal things, and wondering tell of Babel and the works of Memphian kings, learn how their greatest monuments of fame and strength and art are easily outdone by spirits reprobate, and in an hour, what in an age they, with incessant toil and hands innumerable, scarce perform, nigh on the plain, in many cells prepared, that underneath had veins of liquid fire, sluiced from the lake. A second multitude with wondrous art founded the massy ore, severing each kind and scummed the bullion dross. A third as soon had formed within the ground of various mould, and from the boiling cells by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook, as in an organ, from one blast of wind to many a row of pipes the soundboard breathes. Anon out of the earth a fabric huge rose like an exhalation, with the sound of dulcet symphonies and voices sweet, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set, and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave, nor did there want cornice or frieze, with bossy sculptors graven. The roof was fretted gold. Not Babylon nor great Al-Cairo such magnificence equalled in all their glories, to enshrine Belus or Serapis, their gods, or seat their kings, when Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. The ascending pile stood fixed her stately height, and straight the doors, opening their brazen folds, discover, wide within, their ample spaces were the smooth and level pavement. From the arched roof, pendant by subtle magic, many a row of starry lamps and blazing cressets, fed with naphtha and asphaltus, yielded light as from a sky. The hasty multitude admiring entered, and the work some praise, and some the architect. His hand was known in heaven by many a towered structure high, where sceptred angels held their residence and sat as princes, whom the supreme king exalted to such power, and gave to rule, each in his hierarchy, the orders bright. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece, and in Ausonian land men called him Morsiba. And how he fell from heaven they fabled, thrown by angry Jove sheer over the crystal battlements. From morn to noon he fell, from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day, and with the setting sun dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean owl. Thus they relate, erring, for he with his rebellious rout fell long before, nor aught availed him now to have built in heaven high towers, nor did he scape by all his engines, but was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. Meanwhile, the winged heralds, by command of sovereign power, with awful ceremony and trumpets sound, throughout the host proclaim a solemn council forthwith, to be held at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every band and squared regiment, by place or choice the worthiest, they anon with hundreds and with thousands trooping came attended. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide, but chief the spacious hall, though like a covered field where champions bold went riding armed, and at the soldan's chair defied the best of Paynim chivalry to mortal combat or career with lance. Thick swarmed both on the ground and in the air, brushed with the hiss of rustling wings, as bees in springtime when the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their populous youth about the hive. In clusters they among fresh dews and flowers fly to and fro, or on the smoothed plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel, new rubbed with balm, expatiate and confer their state affairs, so thick the airy crowd swarmed and were straitened, till, the signal given, behold a wonder! They but now who seemed in bigness to surpass earth's giant sons, now less than smallest dwarfs, in narrow room throng numberless like that pygmean race beyond the Indian mount, or fairy elves, whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain some belated peasant sees, or dreams he sees, while overhead the moon sits arbitress and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course, they on their mirth and dance intent, with jocund music charm his ear. At once with joy and fear his heart rebounds. Thus incorporeal spirits to smallest forms reduced their shapes immense and were at large, though without number still, amidst the hall of that infernal court, but far within, and in their own dimensions like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubim in close recess and secret conclave sat, 1,000 demigods on golden seats, frequent and full. After short silence then, and summons read, the great consult began. Book 2. High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus and of Ind, or where the gorgeous East with richest hand showers on her kings barbaric pearl and gold, Satan exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair, thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate, to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught, his proud imaginations thus displayed, powers and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigour, though oppressed and fallen, I gave not heaven for lost from this descent. Celestial virtues rising will appear, more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. Me though just right, and the fixed laws of heaven, did first create your leader next. Free choice, with wheat besides in council or in fight, hath been achieved of merit, yet this loss, thus far, at least recovered, hath much more established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns the greatest share of endless pain? Where there is, then, no good for which to strive, no strife can grow up there from faction, for none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain that, with ambitious mind, will covet more. With this advantage, then, to union, and firm faith, and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than prosperity could have assured us, and by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak. He ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptred king, stood up the strongest and the fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by despair. His trust was with the eternal to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than be less cared not to be at all, with that care lost went all his fear of God, or hell, or worse. He recked not, and these words thereafter spake. My sentence is for open war, of wiles, more unexpert, I boast not. Them let those contrive who need, or when they need, not now. For, while they sit contriving, shall the rest, millions that stand in arms, and longing, wait the signal to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's fugitives, and for their dwelling place, accept this dark, opprobrious den of shame, the prison of his tyranny, who reigns by our delay. No, let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury, all at once o'er heaven's high towers to force resistless way, turning our torches into horrid arms against the torturer, when, to meet the noise of his mighty engine, he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lightning see black fire and horrid shot with equal rage. Among his angels and his throne itself, mixed with Tartarean sulphur and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult and steep to scale with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink them, if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake be numb, not still, that in our proper motion we ascend up to our native seat, descent and fall to us is adverse. But who felt of late, when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk this low? The ascent is easy, then. The event is feared. Should we again provoke our stronger, some worse way, his wrath may find to our destruction, if there be in hell fear to be worse destroyed. What can be worse than to dwell here, driven from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us, without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour calls us to penance. More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire, which, to the height enraged, will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential, happier far than miserable to have, eternal being? Or, if our substance be indeed divine, and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge, and battle dangerous to less than gods. On the other side up rose Belial, in act more graceful and humane. A fairer person lost not heaven, he seemed, for dignity composed, and high exploit. But all was false and hollow, though his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worse appear the better reason, to perplex and dash maturest counsels, for his thoughts were low, to vice industrious, but to nobler deeds, timorous and slothful. Yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began: I should be much more for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if what was urged main reason to persuade immediate war did not dissuade me most, and seemed to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success. When he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels, and in what excels mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, as the scope of all his aim, after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with armed watch, that render all access impregnable. Oft on the bordering deep encamp their legions, or with obscure wing scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection to confound heaven's purest light, yet our great enemy, all incorruptible, would on his throne sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mould, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief and purge off the baser fire victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must exasperate the almighty victor, to spend all his rage, and that must end us. That must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure, for who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion? And who knows, let this be good, whether our angry foe can give it or will ever. How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he so wise let loose at once his ire, belike through impotence, or unaware to give his enemies their wish, and end them in his anger, whom his anger saves, to punish endless? Wherefore cease we then? Say they who counsel war, we are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe. Whatever doing, what can we suffer more? What can we suffer worse? Is this then worst? Thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms. What when we fled amain, pursued and struck with heaven's afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us? This hell, then, seemed a refuge for those wounds. Or when we lay chained on the burning lake, that sure was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires, awaked, should blow them into sevenfold rage and plunge us in the flames, or from above should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened, and this firmament of hell should spout her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors, threatening hideous fall one day upon our heads, while we, perhaps, designing or exhorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, should be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey, or racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under yon boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprieved, ages of hopeless end. This would be worse. War, therefore, open or concealed, alike my voice dissuades, for what can force or guile with him, or who deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one view? He from heaven's height all these our motions vain sees and derides, not more almighty to resist our might than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile the race of heaven, thus trampled, thus expelled, to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse, by my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us, and omnipotent decree, the victor's will. To suffer, as to do, our strength is equal, nor the law unjust, that so ordains. This was at first resolved, if we were wise, against so great a foe contending, and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh when those who at the spear are bold and venturous, if that fail them, shrink and fear what yet they know must follow, to endure exile, or ignominy, or bonds, or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which, if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps, thus far removed, not mind us not offending, satisfied with what is punished, whence these raging fires will slacken, if his breath stir not their flames, our purer essence then will overcome, their noxious vapour, or inert not feel, or changed at length, and to the place, conformed in temper and in nature, will receive familiar the fierce heat, and void of pain. This horror will grow mild, this darkness light, besides what hope the never-ending flight or future days may bring, what chance, what change, worth waiting, since our present lot appears for happy, though but ill, for ill, not worst, if we procure not to ourselves more woe. Thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counselled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth, not peace, and after him thus Mammon spake. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven, we war, if war be best, or to regain our own right lost. Him to unthrone we then may hope, when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance, and chaos judge the strife. The former, vain to hope, argues as vain the latter, and what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord Supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent and publish grace to all, on promise made, of new subjection, with what eyes could we stand in his presence humble, and receive strict laws imposed, to celebrate his throne, with warbled hymns, and to his Godhead sing forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits, our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odours and ambrosial flowers, our servile offerings? This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave obtained unacceptable, though in heaven our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek our own good from ourselves, and from our own live to ourselves, though in this vast recess, free and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and in what place soe'er thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labour and endurance. This deep world of darkness do we dread? How oft amidst thick clouds and dark doth heaven's all-ruling Sire choose to reside, his glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round covers his throne, from whence deep thunders roar, mustering their rage, and heaven resembles hell. As he our darkness, cannot we his light imitate when we please? This desert soil wants not her hidden lustre, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art from whence to raise magnificence, and what can heaven show more? Our torments also may, in length of time, become our elements, these piercing fires, as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels, and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are and where, dismissing quite all thoughts of war. Ye have what I advise, the assembly, as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with hoarse cadence lull seafaring men, overwatched, whose bark by chance, or pinnace, anchors in a craggy bay after the tempest. Such applause was heard as Mammon ended, and his sentence pleased, advising peace. For such another field they dreaded worse than hell, so much the fear of thunder, and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this nether empire, which might rise by policy and long process of time, in emulation opposite to heaven, which, when Beelzebub perceived, than whom Satan except, none higher sat with grave aspect, he rose, and in his rising seemed a pillar of state. Deep on his front engraven deliberation sat, and public care, and princely counsel in his face yet shone. Majestic, though in ruin, sage he stood, with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention, still as night or summer's noontide air, while thus he spake. Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, or these titles now must we renounce, and changing style be called princes of hell. For so the popular vote inclines, here to continue and build up here a growing empire doubtless, while we dream, and know not that the King of Heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat, beyond his potent arm, to live exempt from heaven's high jurisdiction, in new league, banded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed, under the inevitable curb, reserved his captive multitude. For he, to be sure, in height or depth, still first and last will reign sole king, and of his kingdom lose no part by our revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with iron sceptre rule us here, as with his golden those in heaven. What's it we then project in peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss irreparable, terms of peace yet none vouchsafed or sought. For what peace will be given to us enslaved, but custody severe, and stripes and arbitrary punishment inflicted? And what peace can we return, but to our power, hostility, and hate, untamed reluctance, and revenge, though slow, yet ever plotting how the conqueror least may reap his conquest, and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel? Nor will occasion want, nor shall we need with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege, or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven ere not, another world, the happy seat of some new race, called man, about this time to be created like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favoured more of him who rules above. So was his will pronounced among the gods, and by an oath that shook heaven's whole circumference confirmed. Thither let us bend all our thoughts to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mould or substance, how endured, and what their power, and where their weakness, how attempted best, by force or subtlety. Though heaven be shut, and heaven's high arbitrator sit secure in his own strength, this place may lie exposed, the utmost border of his kingdom, left to their defence, who hold it. Here, perhaps, some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hellfire to waste his whole creation, or possess all as our own, and drive, as we were driven, the puny habitants, or, if not drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, and with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy in our confusion, and our joy upraise in his disturbance, when his darling sons, hurled headlong to partake with us, shall curse their frail original and faded bliss, faded so soon. Advise if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here, hatching vain empires. Thus Beelzebub pleaded his devilish counsel, first devised by Satan, and in part proposed, for whence but from the author of all ill could spring so deep a malice, to confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell, to mingle and involve, done all to spite the great creator. But their spite still served his glory to augment. The bold design pleased highly those infernal states, and joy sparkled in all their eyes. With full assent they vote, whereat his speech he thus renews. Well have ye judged, well ended long debate, synod of gods, and like to what ye are, great things resolved, which from the lowest deep will once more lift us up, in spite of fate, nearer our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright confines whence, with neighbouring arms and opportune excursion, we may chance re-enter heaven, or else in some mild zone dwell, not unvisited of heaven's fair light, secure, and at the brightening orient beam. Purge off this gloom, the soft delicious air to heal the scar of those corrosive fires, shall breathe her balm. But first, whom shall we send in search of this new world? Whom shall we find sufficient? Who shall tempt with wandering feet the dark, unbottomed, infinite abyss, and through the palpable obscure find out his uncouth way, or spread his airy flight, upborne with indefatigable wings, over the vast abrupt, ere he arrive the happy isle? What strength, what art can then suffice, or what evasion bear him safe, through the strict centuries and stations thick of angels watching round? Here he had need all circumspection, and we now no less choice in our suffrage, for on whom we send the weight of all, and our last hope relies. This said, he sat, and expectation held his look suspense, awaiting who appeared to second or oppose or undertake the perilous attempt. But all sat mute, pondering the danger with deep thoughts, and each in others' countenance read his own dismay, astonished. None among the choice and prime of those heaven-warring champions could be found, so hardy as to proffer or accept alone the dreadful voyage, till at last Satan, whom now transcendent glory raised above his fellows, with monarchal pride, conscious of highest worth, unmoved thus spake. O progeny of heaven, empyreal thrones, with reason hath deep silence and demur seized us, though undismayed. Long is the way, and hard, that out of hell leads up to light. Our prison strong, this huge convex of fire, outrageous to devour, immures us round ninefold, and gates of burning adamant, barred over us, prohibit all egress. These past, if any pass, the void profound of unessential night receives him next, wide gaping, and with utter loss of being, threatens him, plunged in that abortive gulf. If thence he scape, into whatever world or unknown region, what remains him less than unknown dangers, and as hard escape? But I should ill become this throne, O peers, and this imperial sovereignty adorned with splendour, armed with power, if aught proposed and judged of public moment in the shape of difficulty or danger, could deter me from attempting. Wherefore do I assume these royalties, and not refuse to reign, refusing to accept as great a share of hazard as of honour, due alike to him who reigns, and so much to him due of hazard more, as he above the rest high-honoured sits. Go therefore, mighty powers, terror of heaven, though fallen, intend at home, while here shall be our home, what best may ease the present misery, and render hell more tolerable, if there be cure or charm to respite, or deceive, or slack the pain, against a wakeful foe, while I abroad, through all the coasts of dark destruction, seek deliverance for us all. This enterprise none shall partake with me. Thus saying, rose the monarch, and prevented all reply, prudent lest from his resolution raised, others among the chief might offer now, certain to be refused, what erst they feared, and so refused, might an opinion stand his rivals, winning cheap the high repute which he through hazard huge must earn. But they dreaded not more the adventure than his voice forbidding, and at once with him they rose. Their rising all at once was as the sound of thunder heard remote. Towards him they bend with awful reverence prone, and as a god extol him equal to the highest in heaven. Nor failed they to express how much they praised that, for the general safety, he despised his own. For neither do the spirits damned lose all their virtue, lest bad men should boast their specious deeds on earth, which glory excites, or close ambition varnished over with zeal. Thus they their doubtful consultations dark-ended, rejoicing in their matchless chief, as when from mountain tops the dusky clouds ascending, while the north wind sleeps, overspread heaven's cheerful face, the lowering element scowls ere the darkened landscape snow or shower, if chance the radiant sun with farewell sweet extend his evening beam. The fields revive, the birds their notes renew, and bleating herds attest their joy. That hill and valley rings, O shame to men, devil with devil damned, firm concord holds. Men only disagree of creatures rational, though under hope of heavenly grace and God proclaiming peace, yet live in hatred, enmity, and strife among themselves, and levy cruel wars, wasting the earth, each other to destroy, as if, which might induce us to accord, man had not hellish foes, enow besides, that day and night for his destruction wait. The Stygian council thus dissolved, and forth in order came the grand infernal peers, midst came their mighty paramount, and seemed alone the antagonist of heaven, nor less than hell's dread emperor, with pomp supreme, and godlike imitated state, him round a globe of fiery seraphim, enclosed with bright emblazonry and horrent arms. Then of their session ended, they bid cry with trumpets' regal sound the great result. Toward the four winds 4 speedy cherubim put to their mouths the sounding alchemy, by herald's voice explained. The hollow abyss, heard far and wide, and all the host of hell with deafening shout, returned them loud acclaim. Thence more at ease their minds, and somewhat raised by false presumptuous hopes, the ranged powers disband, and wandering each his several way pursues, as inclination or sad choice leads him perplexed, where he may likeliest find truce to his restless thoughts, and entertain the irksome hours, till his great chief return. Part on the plain or in the air sublime, upon the wing or in swift race contend, as at the Olympian games or Pythian fields, part curb their fiery steeds, or shun the goal with rapid wheels, or fronted brigades form, as when, to warn proud cities, war appears waged in the troubled sky, and armies rush to battle in the clouds, before each van prick forth the airy knights and couch their spears, till thickest legions close with feats of arms from either end of heaven. The welkin burns. Others with vast Typhoean rage more fell, rend up both rocks and hills, and ride the air in whirlwind. Hell scarce holds the wild uproar, as when Alcides, from Oechalia crowned with conquest, felt the envenomed robe, and tore through pain up by the roots Thessalian pines, and Lichus from the top of Oeta through into the Euboic Sea. Others, more mild, retreated in the silent valley, sing with notes angelical to many a harp, their own heroic deeds, and hapless fall by doom of battle, and complain that fate-free virtue should enthrall to force or chance. Their song was partial, but the harmony, what could it less when spirits immortal sing, suspended hell, and took with ravishment the thronging audience. In discourse more sweet, for eloquence the soul, song charms the sense. Others apart sat, on a hill retired, in thoughts more elevate, and reasoned high of providence, foreknowledge, will, and fate, fixed fate, free will, foreknowledge absolute, and found no end in wandering mazes lost, of good and evil much they argued then, passion and apathy, and glory and shame, vain wisdom all, and false philosophy. Yet, with a pleasing sorcery, could charm pain for a while or anguish, and excite fallacious hope, or arm the abjured breast with stubborn patience as with triple steel. Another part in squadrons and gross bands, on bold adventure to discover wide that dismal world, if any clime perhaps might yield them easier habitation, bend four ways their flying march, along the banks of four infernal rivers that disgorge into the burning lake, their baleful streams, abhorred Styx, the flood of deadly hate. Sad Acheron of sorrow, black and deep, Cocytus, named of lamentation loud, heard on the rueful stream, fierce Phlegethon, whose waves of torrent fire inflame with rage. Far off from these, a slow and silent stream, Lethe, the river of oblivion, rolls her watery labyrinth, whereof who drinks forthwith his former state, and being forgets both joy and grief, pleasure and pain. Beyond this flood a frozen continent lies, dark and wild, beat with perpetual storms of whirlwind and dire hail, which on firm land thaws not, but gathers heap, and ruin seems of ancient pile, all else deep snow and ice, a gulf profound as that Sobonian bog betwixt Damiata and Mount Cassius old, where armies whole have sunk, the parching air burns furore, and cold performs the effect of fire. Thither, by harpy-footed furies hailed, at certain revolutions all the damned are brought, and feel by turns the bitter change of fierce extremes by change more fierce, from beds of raging fire, to starve in ice their soft ethereal warmth, and there to pine immovable, infixed, and frozen round periods of time, thence hurried back to fire. They ferry over this Lethean sound, both to and fro, their sorrow to augment, and wish and struggle, as they pass to reach the tempting stream, with one small drop to lose in sweet forgetfulness all pain and woe, all in one moment and so near the brink. But fate withstands, and to oppose the attempt, Medusa with Gorgonian terror guards the ford, and of itself the water flies, all taste of living white, as once it fled the lip of Tantalus. Thus roving on in confused march forlorn, the adventurous bands, with shuddering horror pale, and eyes aghast, viewed first their lamentable lot, and found no rest. Through many a dark and dreary vale they passed, and many a region dolorous, over many a frozen, many a fiery Alp, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and shades of death, a universe of death, which God by curse created evil, for evil only good, where all life dies, death lives, and nature breeds. Perverse, all monstrous, all prodigious things, abominable, inutterable and worse than fables yet have feigned or fear conceived, gorgons and hydras and chimeras dire. Meanwhile, the adversary of God and man, Satan, with thoughts inflamed of highest design, puts on swift wings, and towards the gates of hell explores his solitary flight. Sometimes he scours the right-hand coast, sometimes the left, now shaves with level wing the deep, then soars up to the fiery concave, towering high. As when far off at sea a fleet descried hangs in the clouds by equinoctial winds, close sailing from Bengala, or the isles of Ternate and Tidor, whence merchants bring their spicy drugs, they on the trading flood, through the wide Ethiopian to the Cape, ply stemming nightly toward the pole, so seemed far off the flying fiend. At last appear hell-bounds, high reaching to the horrid roof, and thrice threefold the gates, 3 folds were brass, 3 iron, 3 of adamantine rock, impenetrable, impelled with circling fire, yet unconsumed. Before the gates there sat on either side a formidable shape. The one seemed woman to the waist, and fair, but ended foul in many a scaly fold, voluminous and vast, a serpent armed with mortal sting. About her middle round a cry of hellhounds, never ceasing, barked with wide Cerberian mouths, full loud, and rung a hideous peal, yet, when they list, would creep, if aught disturbed their noise, into her womb, and kennel there, yet there still barked and howled within unseen. Far less abhorred than these, vexed Scylla, bathing in the sea that parts Calabria from the hoarse Trinacrian shore, nor uglier follow the night hag, when, called in secret, riding through the air she comes, lured with the smell of infant blood, to dance with Lapland witches, while the labouring moon eclipses at their charms. The other shape, if shape it might be called, that shape had none distinguishable in member, joint or limb, or substance might be called that shadow seemed, for each seemed either black it stood as night, fierce as 10 furies, terrible as hell, and shook a dreadful dart, what seemed his head the likeness of a kingly crown had on. Satan was now at hand, and from his seat the monster moving onward came as fast with horrid strides. Hell trembled as he strode. The undaunted fiend, what this might be admired, not feared. God and his Son except, created thing naught valued, he nor shunned, and with disdainful look thus first began. Whence and what art thou, execrable shape, that darst, though grim and terrible, advance thy miscreated font athwart my way to yonder gates? Through them I mean to pass, that, be assured, without leave asked of thee. Retire or taste thy folly, and learn by proof, hell-born, not to contend with spirits of heaven. To whom the goblin, full of wrath, replied, Art thou that traitor angel? Art thou he, who first broke peace in heaven and faith, till then, unbroken, and in poured rebellious arms, drew after him the third part of heaven's sons, conjured against the highest, for which both thou and they, outcast from God, are here condemned, to waste eternal days in woe and pain? And reckonest thou thyself with spirits of heaven, hell-doomed, and breathed defiance here and scorn, where I reign king, and to enlarge thee more, thy king and lord? Back to thy punishment, false fugitive, and to thy speed add wings, lest with a whip of scorpions I pursue thy lingering, or with one stroke of this dart strange horror seize thee, and pangs unfelt before. So spake the grisly terror, and in shape, so speaking and so threatening, grew tenfold, more dreadful and deform. On the other side, incensed with indignation, Satan stood unterrified, and like a comet burned, that fires the length of Ophiuchus huge, in the Arctic sky, and from his horrid hair shakes pestilence and war. Each at the head levelled his deadly aim, their fatal hands no second stroke intend, and such a frown each cast at the other, as when two black clouds, with heaven's artillery fraught, came rattling on over the Caspian, then stand front to front, hovering a space, till winds the signal blow, to join their dark encounter in mid-air. So frowned the mighty combatants, that hell grew darker at their frown. So matched they stood, for never but once more was wither like to meet so great a foe. And now great deeds had been achieved, whereof all hell had rung, had not the snaky sorceress, that sat fast by hell gate, and kept the fatal key, risen, and with hideous outcry rushed between. O Father, what intends thy hand, she cried, against thy only son? What fury, O son, possessed thee to bend that mortal dart against thy father's head? And know'st for whom? For him who sits above and laughs the while at thee, ordained his drudge to execute whate'er his wrath, which he calls justice, bids, his wrath, which one day will destroy ye both. She spake, and at her words the hellish pest forbore. Then these to her Satan returned. So strange thy outcry, and thy words so strange thou interposest, that my sudden hand prevented spares to tell thee, yet by deeds, what it intends, till first I know of thee, what thing thou art, thus double-formed, and why. In this infernal vale first met, thou call'st me father, and that phantasm call'st my son. I know thee not, nor ever saw till now sight more detestable than him and thee. T, whom thus the portress of Hellgate replied, Hast thou forgot me then? And do I seem now in thine eye so foul? Once deemed so fair in heaven, when at the assembly, and in sight of all the seraphim with thee combined in bold conspiracy against heaven's king, all on a sudden miserable pain surprised thee, dim thine eyes and dizzy swum in darkness, while thy head flames thick and fast, threw forth, till on the left side, opening wide, likest to thee in shape and countenance bright, then shining heavenly fair, a goddess armed, out of thy head I sprung. Amazement seized all the host of heaven. Back they recoiled afraid. At first he called me a sin, and for a sign portentous held me. But familiar grown I pleased, and with attractive graces won the most averse, thee chiefly, who, full oft thyself, in me thy perfect image viewing, becamest enamoured, and such joy thou took'st with me in secret that my womb conceived a growing burden. Meanwhile, war arose. The fields were fought in heaven, wherein remained, for what could else, to our almighty foe, clear victory, to our part loss and rout through all the Empyrean. Down they fell, driven headlong from the pitch of heaven down into this deep, and in the general fall I also, at which time this powerful key into my hands was given, with charge to keep these gates forever shut, which none can pass without my opening. Pensive here I sat alone, but long I sat not, till my womb pregnant by thee, and now excessive grown, prodigious motion felt, and rueful throes. At last this odious offspring, whom thou seest, thine own begotten, breaking violent way, tore through my entrails, that, with fear and pain distorted, all my nether shape thus grew, transformed. But he, my inbred enemy, forth issued, brandishing his fatal dart, made to destroy. I fled, and cried out death. Hell trembled at the hideous name, and sighed from all her caves, and back resounded death. I fled, but he pursued, though more, it seems, inflamed with lust than rage, and swifter far, me overtook, his mother, all dismayed, and in embraces forcible and foul engendering with me, of that rape begot these yelling monsters, that with ceaseless cry surround me, as thou saw'st hourly conceived and hourly born, with sorrow infinite to me, for when they list, into the womb that bred them they return, and howl and gnaw my bowels their repast, then bursting forth afresh, with conscious terrors vex me round, that rest or intermission none I find. Before mine eyes in opposition sits grim death, my son and foe who set them on, and me, his parent, would full soon devour, for want of other prey, but that he knows his end with mine involved, and knows that I should prove a bitter morsel, and his bane, whenever that shall be, so fate pronounced. But thou, O father, I forewarn thee, shun his deadly arrow, neither vainly hope to be invulnerable in those bright arms, through tempered heavenly, for that mortal dint, save he who reigns above, none can resist. She finished, and the subtle fiend his lore soon learned, now milder, and thus answered smooth, Dear daughter, since thou claim'st me for thy sire, and my fair son here show'st me the dear pledge of dalliance, had with thee in heaven, and joys then sweet, now sad to mention, through dire change befallen us, unforeseen, unthought of, no, I come no enemy, but to set free from out this dark and dismal house of pain, both him and thee, and all the heavenly host of spirits that, in our just pretences armed, fell with us from on high. From then I go this uncouth errand soul, and one for all myself expose, with lonely steps to tread the unfounded deep, and through the void immense to search with wondering quest a place foretold should be, and by concurring signs, ere now created, vast and round, a place of bliss in the purlieus of heaven, and therein placed a race of upstart creatures, to supply perhaps our vacant room, though more removed, lest heaven, surcharged with potent multitude, might hap to move new broils. Be this, or aught than this more secret, now designed, I haste to know, and this once known, shall soon return, and bring ye to the place where thou and death shall dwell at ease, and up and down unseen wing silently the buxom air, embalmed with odours. There ye shall be fed and filled immeasurably, all things shall be your prey. He ceased, for both seemed highly pleased, and death grinned horrible, a ghastly smile, to hear his famine should be filled, and blessed his more destined to that good hour. No less rejoiced his mother bade, and thus bespake her sire. The key of this infernal pit, by due and by command of heaven's all-powerful king, I keep, by him, forbidden to unlock these adamantine gates. Against all force death ready stands to interpose his dart, fearless, to be overmatched by living might. But what owe I to his commands above, who hates me and hath hither thrust me down into this gloom of Tartarus profound, to sit in hateful office here confined, inhabitant of heaven and heavenly born, here in perpetual agony and pain, with terrors and with clamours compassed round of mine own brood, that on my boughs freed. Thou art my father, thou my author, thou my being gavest me. Whom should I obey but thee? Whom follow? Thou wilt bring me soon to that new world of light and bliss, among the gods who live at ease, where I shall reign at thy right hand, voluptuous, as beseems thy daughter and thy darling, without end. Thus saying, from her side the fatal key, sad instrument of all our woe, she took, and towards the gate rolling her bestial train, forthwith the huge portcullis high updrew, which but herself not all the Stygian powers could once have moved. Then in the keyhole turns the intricate wards, and every bolt and bar of massy iron or solid rock with ease unfastens. On a sudden open fly with impetuous recoil and jarring sound the infernal doors, and on their hinges great harsh thunder, that the lowest bottom shook of Erebus. She opened, but to shut excelled her power. The gates wide open stood, that with extended wings a bannered host, under spread ensigns marching, might pass through with horse and chariots ranked in loose array. So wide they stood, and like a furnace mouth cast forth redounding smoke and ruddy flame. Before their eyes in sudden view appear the secrets of the hoary deep, a dark, illimitable ocean, without bound, without dimension, where length, breadth, and height, and time and place are lost, where eldest night and chaos, ancestors of nature, hold eternal anarchy amidst the noise of endless wars, and by confusion stand. For hot, cold, moist, and dry, four champions fierce strive here for mastery, and to battle bring their embryon atoms. They around the flag of each his faction, in their several clans, light-armed or heavy, sharp, smooth, swift or slow, swarm populous unnumbered as the sands of Barca, or Cyrene's torrid soil, levied to side with warring winds, and poise their lighter wings. To whom these most adhere he rules a moment. Chaos umpire sits, and by decision more embroils the fray by which he reigns. Next him, high arbiter, chance governs all. Into this wild abyss, the womb of nature, and perhaps her grave, of neither sea nor shore, nor air, nor fire, but all these in their pregnant causes, mixed confusedly, and which thus must ever fight, unless the Almighty Maker them ordain his dark materials to create more worlds. Into this wild abyss the wary fiend stood on the brink of hell, and looked a while, pondering his voyage, for no narrow frith he had to cross. Nor was his ear less peeled with noises loud and ruinous, to compare great things with small, than when Bellona storms, with all her battering engines, bent to raise some capital city, or less than if this frame of heaven were falling, and these elements in mutiny had from her axle torn the steadfast earth. At last he sailed broad vans, he spread for flight, and in the surging smoke, uplifted, spurns the ground, thence many a league, as in a cloudy chair, ascending, rides audacious, but that seat soon failing, meets a vast vacuity. All unawares, fluttering his pennons vain, plumb down he drops 10,000 fathom deep, and to this hour down had been falling, had not, by ill chance, the strong rebuff of some tumultuous cloud, instinct with fire and nitre, hurried him as many miles aloft. That fury stayed, quenched in a boggy Syrtis, neither sea nor good dry land nigh foundered. On he fares, treading the crude consistence, half on foot, half flying, behooves him now both oar and sail. As when a griffon through the wilderness with winged course, over hill or moory dale, pursues the Arimaspian, who by stealth had from his wakeful custody purloined the guarded gold, so eagerly the fiend, over bog or steep, through strait, rough, dense or rare, with head, hands, wings or feet, pursues his way, and swims or sinks, or wades, or creeps, or flies. At length, a universal hubbub wild of stunning sounds and voices, all confused, borne through the hollow dark, assaults his ear with loudest vehemence. Thither he plies undaunted, to meet there whatever power might in that noise reside, of whom to ask which way the nearest coast of darkness lies, bordering on light, when straight behold the throne of chaos, and his dark pavilion spread wide on the wasteful deep. With him enthroned sat sable-vested Night, eldest of things, the consort of his reign, and by them stood Orcus and Hades, and the dreaded name of Demogorgon, rumour next, and chance, and tumult, and confusion, all embroiled, and discord with 1,000 various mouths. To whom Satan, turning boldly thus, ye powers and spirits, and this nethermost abyss, chaos and ancient night, I come no spy, with purpose to explore or to disturb the secrets of your realm, but by constraint wandering this darksome desert, as my way lies through your spacious empire up to light, alone and without guide, half lost I seek, what readiest path leads where your gloomy bounds confine with heaven, or, if some other place from your dominion, one the ethereal king, possesses lately, thither to arrive I travel this profound. Direct my course. Directed, no mean recompense it brings to your behoof. If I that region lost, all usurpation thence expelled, reduced to her original darkness and your sway, which is my present journey, and once more erects the standard there of ancient night. Yours be the advantage all, mine the revenge. Thus Satan and him, thus the Anacold, with faltering speech and visage incomposed, answered, I know thee, stranger, who thou art, that mighty leading angel who of late made head against heaven's king, though overthrown. I saw and heard, and such a numerous host fled, not in silence through the frightened deep, with ruin upon ruin, rout on rout, confusion worse confounded, and heaven gates poured out by millions her victorious bands pursuing. I upon my frontiers here keep residence, if all I can will serve that little which is left so to defend, encroached on still through our intestine, broils weakening the sceptre of old night. First, hell, your dungeon, stretching far and wide beneath. Now lately heaven and earth, another world hung over my realm, linked in a golden chain. To that side heaven from whence your legions fell. If that way be your walk, you have not far, so much the nearer danger. Go and speed, havoc and spoil and ruin are my gain. He ceased, and Satan stayed not to reply, but glad that now his sea should find a shore, with fresh alacrity and force renewed, springs upward like a pyramid of fire, into the wild expanse, and through the shock of fighting elements, on all sides round environed, wins his way, harder beset and more endangered than when Argo passed through Bosporus betwixt the justling rocks, or when Ulysses on the larboard shunned Charybdis and by the other whirlpool steered. So he, with difficulty and labour, hard moved on, with difficulty and labour he. But he once passed soon after, when man fell, strange alteration, sin and death amain, following his track, such was the will of heaven, paved after him a broad and beaten way over the dark abyss, whose boiling gulf tamely endured a bridge of wondrous length from hell continued, reaching the utmost orb of this frail world, by which the spirits perverse with easy intercourse pass to and fro, to tempt or punish mortals, except whom God and good angels guard by special grace. But now, at last, the sacred influence of light appears, and from the walls of heaven shoots far into the bosom of dim night a glimmering dawn. Here nature first begins her farthest verge, and chaos to retire. As from her outmost works a broken foe, with tumult less and with less hostile din, that Satan with less toil and now with ease wafts on the calmer wave by dubious light, and like a weather-beaten vessel holds gladly the port, though shrouds and tackle torn, or in the emptier waste resembling air weighs his spread wings, at leisure to behold far off the empyreal heaven, extended wide, in circuit, undetermined square or round, with opal towers and battlements adorned of living sapphire, once his native seat, and fast by, hanging in a golden chain. This pendant world in bigness as a star of smallest magnitude close by the moon, thither, full fraught with mischievous revenge. Accursed, and in a cursed hour, he dies. Book 3. Hail, holy light, offspring of heaven firstborn, or of the eternal co-eternal beam, may I express thee unblamed, since God is light, and never but in unapproached light dwelt from eternity, dwelt then in thee bright effluence of bright essence increate. Or hear'st thou rather pure ethereal stream, whose fountain who shall tell? Before the sun, before the heavens thou wert, and at the voice of God, as with a mantle didst invest the rising world of waters dark and deep, one from the void and formless infinite. Thee I revisit now with bolder wing, escaped the Stygian pool, though long detained in that obscure sojourn, while in my flight, through utter and through middle darkness borne, with other notes than to the Orphean lyre, I sung of chaos and eternal night. Taught by the heavenly muse to venture down the dark descent and up to reascend, though hard and rare, thee I revisit safe, and feel thy sovereign vital lamp, but thou revisitest not these eyes, that roll in vain to find thy piercing ray, and find no dawn, so thick a drop serene hath quenched their orbs, or dim suffusion veiled. Yet not the more cease I to wonder where the muses haunt, clear spring, or shady grove, or sunny hill, smit with the love of sacred song, but chiefly Zion and the flowery brooks beneath, that wash thy hallowed feet, and warbling flow. Nightly I visit, nor sometimes forget those other two equalled with me in fate. So were I equalled with them in renown, thy sovereign command, that man should find grace, blind Thamaris and blind Maeonides, and Tiresias, and Phineus, prophets old, then feed on thoughts that voluntary move harmonious numbers, as the wakeful bird sings darkling, and in shadiest covert hid tunes her nocturnal note. Thus with the year seasons return, but not to me returns day, or the sweet approach of even or morn, or sight, or vernal bloom, or summer's rose, or flocks, or herds, or human face divine, but cloud instead and ever-during dark surrounds me, from the cheerful ways of men cut off, and for the book of knowledge fair presented with a universal blank of nature's works, to me expunged and rest, and wisdom at one entrance quite shut out. So much the rather thou, celestial light, shine inward, and the mind through all her powers irradiate. There plant eyes, all mist from thence purge and disperse, that I may see and tell of things invisible to mortal sight. Now hath the Almighty Father from above, from the pure empyrean where he sits high throned above all height, bent down his eye, his own works and their works at once to view. About him all the sanctities of heaven stood thick as stars, and from the sight received beatitude past utterance. On his right the radiant image of his glory sat, his only Son. On earth he first beheld our two first parents, yet the only two of mankind in the happy garden, placed reaping immortal fruits of joy and love, uninterrupted joy, unrivalled love. In blissful solitude he then surveyed hell and the gulf between, and Satan there, coasting the wall of heaven on this side, night, in the dun air sublime, and ready now to stoop with wearied wings and willing feet. On the bare outside of this world that seemed firm, land embosomed without firmament, uncertain which, in ocean or in air, him God beholding from his prospect high, wherein past, present, future, he beholds thus to his only Son, foreseeing spake. Only begotten Son, seest thou what rage transports our adversary, whom no bounds prescribed, no bars of hell, nor all the chains heaped on him there, nor yet the main abyss wide interrupt can hold, so bent he seems on desperate revenge that shall redound upon his own rebellious head. And now, through all restraint broke loose, he wings his way not far off heaven, in the precincts of light, directly towards the new created world, and man there placed with purpose to essay if him by force he can destroy, or, worse, by some false guile pervert, and shall pervert, for man will hearken to his glozing lies, and easily transgress the sole command, sole pledge of his obedience. So will fall he, and his faithless progeny, whose fault? Whose but his own? In great, he had of me all he could have. I made him just and right, sufficient to have stood, though free to fall. Such I created all the ethereal powers and spirits, both them who stood and them who failed. Freely they stood who stood, and fell who fell. Not free, what proof could they have given sincere of true allegiance, constant faith, or love, where only what they needs must do appeared, not what they would? What praise could they receive? What pleasure I from such obedience paid, when will and reason also is choice, useless and vain, of freedom, both despoiled, made passive both, had served necessity, not me. They therefore, as to right belonged, so were created, nor can justly accuse their maker, or their making, or their fate, as if predestination overruled their will disposed by absolute decree, or high foreknowledge they themselves decreed their own revolt. Not I. If I foreknew, foreknowledge had no influence on their fault, which had no less proved certain unforeknown. So without least impulse or shadow of fate, or aught by me immutably foreseen, they trespass authors to themselves in all, both what they judge and what they choose. For so I formed them free, and free they must remain, till they enthrall themselves. I else must change their nature, and revoke the high decree, unchangeable, eternal, which ordained their freedom, they themselves ordained their fall. The first sort, by their own suggestion fell, self-tempted, self-depraved. Man falls, deceived by the other first. Man therefore shall find grace, the other none. In mercy and justice both, through heaven and earth, so shall my glory excel. But mercy, first and last, shall brightest shine. Thus while God spake, ambrosial fragrance filled all heaven, and in the blessed spirits, elect sense of new joy, ineffable, diffused. Beyond compare the Son of God was seen, most glorious. In him all his Father shone substantially expressed. And in his face divine compassion visibly appeared. Love without end, and without measure grace, which uttering, thus he to his Father spake. O Father, gracious was that word which closed thy sovereign command that man should find grace, for which both heaven and earth shall high extol thy praises with the innumerable sound of hymns and sacred songs, wherewith thy throne encompassed shall resound thee ever blessed. For should man finally be lost, should man, thy creature late so loved, thy youngest son, fall circumvented thus by fraud, though joined with his own folly? That be from thee far, that far be from thee, Father, who art judge of all things made, and judgest only right. Or shall the adversary thus obtain his end, and frustrate thine? Shall he fulfill his malice, and thy goodness bring to naught? Or proud return, though to his heavier doom, yet with revenge accomplished, and to hell draw after him the whole race of mankind, by him corrupted? Or wilt thou myself abolish thy creation, and unmake for him what for thy glory thou hast made? So should thy goodness and thy greatness both be questioned and blasphemed without defense. To whom the great Creator thus replied, O Son, in whom my soul hath chief delight, Son of my bosom, Son who art alone, my word, my wisdom, and effectual might, all hast thou spoken as my thoughts are, all as my eternal purpose hath decreed. Man shall not quite be lost, but saved who will. Yet not of will in him, but grace in me, freely vouchsafed. Once more I will renew his lapsed powers, though forfeit, and enthralled by sin, to foul exorbitant desires, upheld by me, yet once more he shall stand on even ground against his mortal foe. By me upheld, that he may know how frail his fallen condition is, and to me owe all his deliverance, and to none but me. Some I have chosen of peculiar grace, elect above the rest. So is my will. The rest shall hear me call, and oft be warned their sinful state, and to appease betimes the incensed deity, while offered grace invites. For I will clear their senses dark, what may suffice and soften stony hearts, to pray, repent, and bring obedience due. To prayer, repentance, and obedience due. Though but endeavoured with sincere intent, mine ear shall not be slow, mine eye not shut, and I will place within them as a guide my umpire conscience, whom if they will hear, light after light, well used, they shall attain, and to the end, persisting, safe arrive. This my long sufferance and my day of grace, they who neglect and scorn shall never taste, but hard be hardened, blind be blinded more, that they may stumble on and deeper fall. And none but such from mercy I exclude. And yet all is not done. Man disobeying, disloyal, breaks his fealty, and sins against the high supremacy of heaven, affecting Godhead, and so losing all, to expiate his treason hath naught left, but to destruction sacred and devote. He, with his whole posterity, must die. Die he or justice must, unless for him some other able and as willing pay the rigid satisfaction, death for death. Say, heavenly powers, where shall we find such love? Which of you will be mortal to redeem man's mortal crime, and just the unjust to save? Dwells in all heaven charity so dear? He asked, but all the heavenly choir stood mute, and silence was in heaven. On man's behalf, patron or intercessor, none appeared. Much less than durst upon his own head draw the deadly forfeiture and ransom set. And now without redemption all mankind must have been lost, adjudged to death and hell by doom severe, had not the Son of God, in whom the fullness dwells of love divine, his dearest mediation thus renewed. Father, thy word is past, man shall find grace, and shall grace not find means that finds her way. The speediest of thy winged messengers, to visit all thy creatures, and to all comes unprevented, unimplored, unsought. Happy for man so coming, he her aid can never seek. Once dead in sins, and lost, atonement for himself, or offering meet, indebted and undone, hath none to bring. Behold me then, me for him, life for life, I offer. On me let thine anger fall. Account me man, I for his sake will leave thy bosom, and this glory next to thee freely put off, and for him lastly die, well pleased. On me let death recall his rage. Under his gloomy power I shall not long lie vanquished. Thou hast given me to possess life in myself forever. By thee I live, though now to death I yield and am his due. All that of me can die, yet that debt paid, thou wilt not leave me in the loathsome grave, his prey, nor suffer my unspotted soul forever with corruption there to dwell. But I shall rise, victorious, and subdue my vanquisher, spoiled of his vaunted spoil. Death his death's wound shall then receive, and stooping glorious of his mortal sting disarmed, I through the ample air in triumph high shall lead hell captive, maugre hell, and show the powers of darkness bound. Thou at the sight, pleased out of heaven, shall look down and smile, while by thee raised I ruin all my foes. Death last, and with the carcass glut the grave, then with the multitude of my redeemed shall enter heaven, long absent, and return, Father, to see thy face, wherein no cloud of anger shall remain, but peace assured. And reconcilement wrath shall be no more thenceforth, but in thy presence joy entire. His words here ended, but his meek aspect silent yet spake, and breathed immortal love to mortal men, above which only shone filial obedience, as a sacrifice, glad to be offered, he attends the will of his great Father. Admiration seized all heaven, what this might mean, and with attend, wondering. But soon the Almighty thus replied, O thou in heaven and earth, the only peace found out for mankind, under wrath, O thou my soul, complacence. Well thou knowest how dear to me are all my works, nor man the least, though last created, that for him I spare thee from my bosom and right hand, to save, by losing thee a while, the whole race lost. Thou therefore, whom thou only canst redeem, their nature also to thy nature join. And be thyself man among men on earth, made flesh, when time shall be, of virgin seed, by wondrous birth. Be thou in Adam's room, the head of all mankind, though Adam's son. As in him perish all men, so in thee, as from a second root, shall be restored as many as are restored, without thee none. His crime makes guilty all his sons, thy merit imputed, thou absolve them, who renounce their own both righteous and unrighteous deeds, and live in thee transplanted, and from thee receive new life. So man, as is most just, shall satisfy for man, be judged and die, and dying rise, and rising with him raise his brethren, ransomed with his own dear life. So heavenly love shall outdo hellish hate, giving to death and dying to redeem, so dearly to redeem what hellish hate so easily destroyed and still destroys, in those who, when they may, accept not grace, nor shalt thou, by descending to assume man's nature, lessen or degrade thine own, because thou hast, though throned in highest bliss, equal to God, and equally enjoying godlike fruition, quitted all to save a world from utter loss, and hast been found by merit more than birthright Son of God. Found worthiest to be so by being good, far more than great or high, because in thee love hath abounded more than glory abounds. Therefore thy humiliation shall exalt, with thee thy manhood also to this throne. Here shalt thou sit incarnate, here shalt reign both God and man, Son both of God and man. Anointed universal King, all power I give thee, reign forever, and assume thy merits under thee as head supreme. Thrones, princedoms, powers, dominions I reduce, all knees to thee shall bow, of them that bide in heaven or earth, or under earth in hell, when thou attended gloriously from heaven, shalt in the sky appear, and from thee send the summoning archangels to proclaim thy dread tribunal, forthwith from all winds the living, and forthwith the sighted dead of all past ages, to the general doom shall hasten. Such appeal shall rouse their sleep. Then all thy saints assembled, thou shalt judge bad men and angels. They, arraigned, shall sink beneath thy sentence. Hell, her numbers full, thenceforth shall be forever shut. Meanwhile the world shall burn, and from her ashes spring new heaven and earth, wherein the just shall dwell, and after all their tribulations long, see golden days, fruitful of golden deeds, with joy and peace triumphing, and fair truth. Then thou thy regal sceptre shall lay by, for regal sceptre then no more shall need. God shall be all in all, but all ye gods adore him, who to compass all this dies. Adore the Son, and honour him as me. No sooner had the Almighty ceased, But all the multitude of angels with a shout, loud as from numbers without number, sweet as from blessed voices, uttering joy, heaven rung with jubilee, and loud hosannas filled the eternal regions. Lowly reverent towards either throne they bow, and to the ground with solemn adoration down they cast their crowns inwove with amaranth and gold, immortal amaranth, a flower which once in paradise, fast by the tree of life, began to bloom. But soon for man's offence to heaven removed, where first it grew, there grows and flowers aloft standing the front of life, and where the river of bliss through midst of heaven rolls, Elysian flowers, her amber stream, with these that never fade, the spirit elect bind their resplendent locks, enwreathed with beams, now in loose garlands, thick thrown off the bright pavement, that like a sea of jasper shone, empurpled with celestial roses smiled. Then, crowned again, their golden harps they took, harps ever turned, that glittering by their side like quivers hung, and with preamble sweet of charming symphony, they introduced their sacred song, and wakened raptures high. No voice exempt, no voice but well could join melodious part, such concord is in heaven. Thee, Father, first they sung omnipotent, immutable, immortal, infinite, eternal King, the author of all being, fountain of light, thyself invisible amidst the glorious brightness, where thou sitst, throned inaccessible. But when thou shadest the full blaze of thy beams, and through a cloud drawn round about thee like a radiant shrine, dark with excessive bright thy skirts appear, yet dazzle heaven, that brightest seraphim approach not, but with both wings veil their eyes. Thee next they sang of all creation first, begotten Son, divine similitude, in whose conspicuous countenance without cloud made visible the Almighty Father shrines, whom else no creature can behold. On thee impressed the effulgence of his glory abides, transfused on thee his ample spirit rests. He, heaven of heavens, and all the powers therein by thee created, and by thee threw down the aspiring dominations, thou that day thy father's dreadful thunder didst not spare, nor stop thy flaming chariot wheels that shook heaven's everlasting frame, while over the next thou drovest of warring angels disarrayed, back from pursuit thy powers with loud acclaim, thee only extolled, Son of thy Father's might, to execute fierce vengeance on his foes. Not so on man, him through their malice fallen, Father of mercy and grace, thou didst not doom so strictly, but much more to pity incline. No sooner did thy dear and only Son perceive thee purposed not to doom frail man so strictly, but much more to pity inclined, he, to appease thy wrath, and end the strife of mercy and justice in thy face discerned, regardless of the bliss wherein he sat, second to thee, offered himself to die for man's offence. O unexampled love, love nowhere to be found, less than divine. Hail, Son of God, Saviour of men, thy name shall be the copious matter of my song. Henceforth and never shall my heart thy praise forget, nor from thy Father's praise disjoin. Thus they in heaven, above the starry sphere, their happy hours in joy and hymning spent. Meanwhile, upon the firm, opacous globe of this round world, whose first convex divides the luminous inferior orbs, enclosed from chaos and the inroad of darkness old. Satan alighted walks, a globe far off it seemed, now seems a boundless continent, dark, waste, and wild, under the frown of night, starless exposed, and ever-threatening storms of chaos blustering round. Inclement sky, save on that side which, from the wall of heaven, though distant far, some small reflection gains of glimmering air, less vexed with tempest loud. Here walked the fiend at large in spacious field, as when a vaulter on Imus bred, whose snowy ridge the roving Tartar bounds, dislodging from a region scarce of prey, to gorge the flesh of lambs or yeanling kids, on hills where flocks are fed, flies towards the springs of Ganges or Hydaspes, Indian streams, but in his way lights on the barren plains of Serikana, where Chineses drive with sails and wind their caney wagons light. So, on this windy sea of land, the fiend walked up and down alone, bent on his prey, alone, for other creature in this place, living or lifeless, to be found was none. None yet, but store hereafter from the earth, up hither like aerial vapours flew, of all things transitory and vain, when sin with vanity had filled the works of men. Both all things vain, and all who in vain things built their fond hopes of glory, or lasting fame, or happiness in this or the other life, all who have their reward on earth, the fruits of painful superstition and blind zeal, naught seeking but the praise of men, here find fit retribution, empty as their deeds, all the unaccomplished works of nature's hand, abortive, monstrous, or unkindly mixed, dissolved on earth, fleet hither, and in vain, till final dissolution, wander here, not in the neighbouring moon as some have dreamed, those argent fields, more likely inhabitants, translated saints or middle spirits hold betwixt the angelical and human kind. Hither of ill-joined sons and daughters born, first from the ancient world those giants came, with many a vain exploit, though then renowned, the builders next of Babel on the plain of Senna, and still with vain designs new Babels had they wherewithal would build. Others came single, he who, to be deemed a god, leaped fondly into Etna flames, Empedocles, and he who, to enjoy Plato's Elysium, leaped into the sea, Cleombrotus, and many more too long, embryos and idiots, eremites, and friars white, black, and grey, with all their trumpery. Here pilgrims roam, that strayed so far to seek in Golgotha him dead, who lives in heaven, and they who, to be sure of paradise, dying, put on the weeds of Dominic, or in Franciscan think to pass disguised. They pass the planets 7, and past the fixed, and that crystalline sphere whose balance weighs the trepidation talked, and that first moved, and now St. Peter at heaven's wicket seems to wait them with his keys, and now at foot of heaven's ascent they lift their feet, when in a violent cross wind from either coast blows them transverse 10,000 leagues awry into the devious air. Then might ye see cowls, hoods, and habits with their wearers tossed and fluttered into rags, then relics, beads, indulgences, dispenses, pardons, balls, the sport of winds, all these up-whirled aloft, fly over the backside of the world far off into a limbo large and broad, since called the paradise of fools, to few unknown, long after, now unpeopled and untrod. All this dark globe the fiend found as he passed, and long he wandered, till at last a gleam of dawning light turned thitherward in haste. His travelled steps, far distant, he descries, ascending by degrees, magnificent, up to the wall of heaven, a structure high, at top whereof but far more rich appeared the work as of a kingly palace gate, with frontispiece of diamond and gold, embellished thick with sparkling orient gems. The portal shone, inimitable on earth, by model or by shading pencil drawn. These stairs were such as whereon Jacob saw angels ascending and descending, bands of guardians bright, when he from Esau fled to Padanaram in the field of Luz, dreaming by night under the open sky, and waking cried, "This is the gate of heaven." Each stair mysteriously was meant, nor stood there always, but drawn up to heaven, sometimes viewless, and underneath a bright sea flowed of jasper or of liquid pearl, whereon who, after came from earth, failing arrived, wafted by angels, or flew over the lake, wrapped in a chariot drawn by fiery steeds. The stairs were then let down, whether to dare the fiend by easy ascent, or aggravate his sad exclusion from the doors of bliss, direct against which opened from beneath, just over the blissful seat of paradise, a passage down to the earth, a passage wide, wider by far than that of after times, over Mount Zion, and, though that were large, over the promised land to God so dear, by which to visit oft those happy tribes, on high behests, his angels, to and fro, passed frequent, and his eye with choice regard from Panaeus, the fount of Jordan's flood, to Beersaba, where the Holy Land borders on Egypt and the Arabian shore, so wide the opening seemed, where bounds were set to darkness, such as bound the ocean wave. Satan, from hence, now on the lower stair, that scaled by steps of gold to heaven gate, looks down with wonder at the sudden view of all this world at once, as when a scout, through dark and desert ways with peril gone, all night, at last by break of cheerful dawn, obtains the brow of some high-climbing hill, which to his eye discovers unaware the goodly prospect of some foreign land, first seen, or some renowned metropolis, with glistering spires and pinnacles adorned, which now the rising sun gilds with his beams. Such wonder seized, though after heaven seen, the spirits malign, but much more envy seized, at sight of all this world beheld so fair. Round he surveys, and well might, where he stood so high above the circling canopy of night's extended shade, from eastern point of Libra to the fleecy star that bears Andromeda far off Atlantic seas. Beyond the horizon, then from pole to pole he views in breadth, and without longer pause, down right into the world's first region, throws his flight precipient, and wins with ease, through the pure marble air, his oblique way amongst innumerable stars, that shone, stars distant, but nigh hand seemed other worlds, or other worlds they seemed, or happy isles, like those Hesperian gardens famed of old, fortunate fields and groves and flowery vales, thrice happy isles, but who dwelt happy there. He stayed not to inquire. Above them all the golden sun in splendour, likest heaven, allured his eye, thither his course he bends, through the calm firmament, but up or down, by centre or eccentric, hard to tell, or longitude, where the great luminary aloof, the vulgar constellations thick, that from his lordly eye keep distance due. Dispenses light from far, they, as they move, their starry dance in numbers that compute days, months, and years towards his all-cheering lamp, turn swift their various motions, or are turned by his magnetic beam that gently warms the universe, and to each inward part with gentle penetration, though unseen, shoots invisible virtue even to the deep. So wondrously was set his station bright. There lands the fiend, a spot like which perhaps astronomer in the sun's lucent orb through his glazed optic tube yet never saw. The place he found beyond expression bright, compared with aught on earth, metal or stone, not all parts like, but all alike informed with radiant light, as glowing iron with fire. If metal, part seemed gold, part silver clear; if stone, carbuncle most, or chrysolite, ruby or topaz, to the 12 that shone in Aaron's breastplate, and a stone besides, imagined rather oft than elsewhere seen. That stone, or like to that which here below philosophers in vain so long have sought, in vain though by their powerful art they bind volatile Hermes, and call up unbound in various shapes old Proteus from the sea, drained through a limbeck to his native form. What wonder then if fields and regions here breathe forth elixir pure, and rivers run potable gold, when with one virtuous touch the arch-chemic sun, so far from us remote, produces with terrestrial humour mixed. Here in the dark so many precious things of colour glorious, and effect so rare. Here matter new to gaze the devil met, undazzled, far and wide his eye commands, for sight no obstacle found here, no shade, but all sunshine, as when his beams, at noon, culminate from the equator, as they now shot upward, still direct, whence no way round shadow from body opaque can fall. And the air, nowhere so clear, sharpened his visual ray, to objects distant far, whereby he soon saw within ken a glorious angel stand, the same whom John saw also in the sun. His back was turned, but not his brightness hid, of beaming sunny rays a golden tear circled his head, nor less his locks behind illustrious on his shoulders, fledged with wings, lay waving round on some great charge employed, he seemed, or fixed in cogitation deep. Glad was the spirit impure, as now in hope to find who might direct his wandering flight. To paradise, the happy seat of man, his journey's end and our beginning woe. But first he casts to change his proper shape, which else might work him danger or delay. And now a stripling cherub he appears, not of the prime, yet such as in his face youth smiled celestial, and to every limb suitable grace diffused. So well he feigned, under a coronet, his flowing hair in curls on either cheek played. Wings he wore, of many a coloured plume, sprinkled with gold, his habit fit for speed succinct, and held before his descent steps a silver wand. He drew not nigh unheard, the angel bright, ere he drew nigh, his radiant visage turned, admonished by his ear, and straight was known the archangel Uriel, one of the 7 who in God's presence nearest to the throne stand ready at command, and are his eyes that run through all the heavens, or down to the earth, bear his swift errands over moist and dry, over sea and land. Him Satan thus accosts. Uriel, for thou of those 7 spirits that stand in sight of God's high throne, gloriously bright, the first art wont his great, authentic will, interpreter through highest heaven to bring, where all his sons thy embassy attend, and here art likeliest by supreme decree like honour to obtain, and as his eye to visit oft this new creation round. Unspeakable desire to see and know all these his wondrous works, but chiefly man, his chief delight and favour, him for whom all these his works so wondrous he ordained, hath brought me from the choirs of cherubim, alone thus wondering. Brightest seraph, tell in which of all these shining orbs hath man his fixed seat, or fixed seat hath none? But all these shining orbs his choice to dwell, that I may find him, and with secret gaze or open admiration him behold, on whom the great Creator hath bestowed worlds, and on whom hath all these graces poured, that both in him and all things, as is meet, the universal Maker we may praise, who justly hath driven out his rebel foes to deepest hell, and to repair that loss, created this new happy race of men to serve him better. Wise are all his ways. So spake the false dissembler unperceived, for neither man nor angel can discern hypocrisy. The only evil that walks invisible, except to God alone, by his permissive will through heaven and earth, and oft, though wisdom wake, suspicion sleeps at wisdom's gate, and to simplicity resigns her charge, while goodness thinks no ill where no ill seems, which now for once beguiled Uriel, though regent of the sun, and housed the sharpest sighted spirit of all in heaven, who to the fraudulent impostor foul, in his uprightness answer thus returned. Fair angel, thy desire, which tends to know the works of God, thereby to glorify the great workmaster, leads to no excess that reaches blame, but rather merits praise, the more it seems excess that led thee hither from thy imperial mansion, thus alone, to witness with thine eyes what some perhaps, contented with report, hear only in heaven. For wonderful indeed are all his works, pleasant to know, and worthiest to be all, had in remembrance always with delight. But what created mind can comprehend their number, or the wisdom infinite that brought them forth, but hid their causes deep? I saw when at his word the formless mass, this world's material mould, came to a heap, confusion heard his voice, and wild uproar stood vast in finitude confined, till at his second bidding darkness fled, light shone, and order from disorder sprung. Swift to their several quarters hastened then the cumbrous elements, earth, flood, air, fire, and this ethereal quintessence of heaven flew upward, spirited with various forms that rolled orbicular, and turned to stars numberless as thou seest, and how they move. Each had his place appointed, each his course, the rest in circuit walls this universe. Look downward on that globe whose hither side with light from hence, though but reflected, shines. That place is earth, the seat of man, that light his day, which else, as the other hemisphere, night would invade. But there the neighbouring moon, so cool that opposite fair star, her aid timely interposes, and her monthly round, still ending, still renewing, through mid-heaven, with borrowed light, her countenance triform, hence fills and empties to enlighten the earth, and in her pale dominion checks the night. That spot to which I point is paradise, Adam's abode, those lofty shades his bower. Thy way thou canst not miss, me mine requires. As to superior spirits, his wont in heaven, where honour due and reverence none neglects, took leave, and toward the coasts of earth beneath, down from the ecliptic, sped with hoped success, throws his steep flight in many an airy wheel, nor stayed till on Niphate's top he lights. Book 4. Oh, for that warning voice, which he, who saw the apocalypse, heard cry in heaven aloud. Then, when the dragon, put to second rout, came furious down to be revenged on men, woe to the inhabitants on earth, that now, while time was, our first parents had been warned the coming of their secret foe, and scaped happily, so scaped his mortal snare. For now Satan, now first inflamed with rage, came down, the tempter, ere the accuser of mankind, to wreak on innocent frail man his loss of that first battle and his flight to hell, yet not rejoicing in his speed, though bold, far off and fearless, nor with cause to boast, begins his dire attempt, which nigh the birth, now rolling, boils in his tumultuous breast, and like a devilish engine, back recoils upon himself. Horror and doubt distract his troubled thoughts, and from the bottom stir the hell within him. For within him hell he brings, and round about him, nor from hell one step, no more than from himself, can fly by change of place. Now conscience wakes despair that slumbered, wakes the bitter memory of what he was, what is, and what must be. Worse and worse deeds, worse sufferings must ensue. Sometimes towards Eden, which now in his view lay pleasant, his grieved look he fixes sad, sometimes towards heaven, and the full blazing sun, which now sat high in his meridian tower, then, much revolving, thus in sighs began. O thou that, with surpassing glory crowned, lookest from thy sole dominion like the God of this new world, at whose sight all the stars hide their diminished heads, to thee I call, but with no friendly voice, and add thy name of Sun, to tell thee how I hate thy beams, that bring to my remembrance from what state I fell, how glorious once above thy sphere, till pride and worse ambition threw me down, warring in heaven against heaven's matchless king. Ah, wherefore? He deserved no such return from me, whom he created, what I was, in that bright eminence, and with his good upbraided none. Nor was his service hard. What could be less than to afford him praise, the easiest recompense, and pay him thanks? How due! Yet all his good proved ill in me, and wrought but malice. Lifted up so high, I stained subjection, and thought one step higher would set me highest, and in a moment quit the debt immense of endless gratitude, so burdensome still paying, still to owe, forgetful what from him I still received, and understood not that a grateful mind, by owing, owes not, but still pays, at once indebted and discharged. What burden then, had his powerful destiny ordained me some inferior angel? I had stood then happy. No unbounded hope had raised ambition. Yet why not some other power as great might have aspired, and me, though mean, draw to his part, but other powers as great fell not, but stand unshaken from within or from without, to all temptations armed, hast thou the same free will and power to stand? Thou hast. Whom hast thou, then, or what to accuse, but heaven's free love dealt equally to all? Be then his love accursed, since love or hate, to me alike, it deals eternal woe. Nay, cursed be thou, since against his thy will chose freely what it now so justly rues. Me, miserable, which way shall I fly infinite wrath and infinite despair? Which way I fly is hell, myself am hell, and in the lowest deep, a lower deep, still threatening to despair me, opens wide, to which the hell I suffer seems a heaven. Oh, then, at last relent. Is there no place left for repentance, none for pardon left? None left but by submission, and that word disdain forbids me, and my dread of shame among the spirits beneath, whom I seduced with other promises and other vaunts, than to submit, boasting I could subdue the omnipotent. Ay me, they little know how dearly I abide that boast so vain, under what torment inwardly I groan, while they adore me on the throne of hell. With diadem and sceptre high advanced, the lower still I fall, only supreme in misery. Such joy ambition finds. But say I could repent, and could obtain, by act of grace, my former state, how soon would Hythe recall high thoughts, how soon unsay what feigned submission swore. Ease would recant vows made in pain, as violent and void. For never can true reconcilement grow, where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep, which would but lead me to a worse relapse and heavier fall. So should I purchase dear short intermission, bought with double smart. This knows my punisher, therefore as far from granting he, as I from begging, peace, all hope excluded thus, behold, instead of us outcast, exiled, his new delight, mankind created, and for him this world. So farewell, hope, and with hope farewell, fear. Farewell, remorse, all good to me is lost. Evil be thou my good, by thee at least divided empire, with heaven's king I hold, by thee, and more than half perhaps will reign, as man ere long, and this new world shall know. Thus while he spake, each passion dimmed his face, thrice changed with pale ire, envy, and despair, which marred his borrowed visage, and betrayed him counterfeit, if any eye beheld. For heavenly minds from such distempers foul are ever clear, whereof he soon aware, each perturbation smoothed with outward calm, artificer of fraud, and was the first that practised falsehood under saintly show, deep malice to conceal, couched with revenge, yet not enough had practised to deceive. Uriel, once warned, whose eye pursued him down the way he went, and on the Assyrian mount saw him disfigured, more than could befall spirit of happy sort. His gestures fierce, he marked and mad demeanour, then alone, as he supposed, all unobserved, unseen. So on he fares, and to the border comes of Eden, where delicious paradise, now nearer, clowns with her enclosure green, as with a rural mound, the champaign head of a steep wilderness, whose hairy sides with thicket overgrown, grotesque and wild, access denied, and overhead upgrew insuperable height of loftiest shade, cedar and pine and fir and branching palm, a sylvan scene, and as the ranks ascend, shade above shade, a woody theatre of stateliest view. Yet higher than their tops the verdurous wall of paradise upsprung, which to our general sire gave prospect large into his nether empire neighbouring round. And higher than that wall a circling row of goodliest trees, loaden with fairest fruit, blossoms and fruits at once of golden hue, appeared with gay enamelled colours mixed, on which the sun more glad impressed his beams than in fair evening cloud or humid bough, when God hath showered the earth. So lovely seemed that landskip, and of pure now purer air meets his approach, and to the heart inspires vernal delight and joy, able to drive all sadness but despair. Now gentle gales fanning their odoriferous wings dispense native perfumes and whisper whence they stole those balmy spoils, as when to them who fell beyond the Cape of Hope and now are past Mozambique, off at sea northeast winds blow Sabine odours from the spicy shore of Araby the blessed. With such delay, well pleased they slack their course, and many a league, cheered with the grateful smell, old ocean smiles, so entertained those odorous sweets, the fiend, who came their bane, though with them better pleased than Asmodeus, with the fishy fume that drove him, though enamoured, from the spouse of Tobit's son, and with a vengeance sent from Media post to Egypt, there fast bound. Now to the ascent of that steep savage hill Satan had journeyed on, pensive and slow, but further way found none, so thick entwined. As one continued brake, the undergrowth of shrubs and tangling bushes had perplexed all path of man or beast that passed that way. One gate there only was, and that looked east on the other side, which, when the arch-felon saw, due entrance he disdained, and, in contempt, at one flight bound high, overleaped all bound of hill or highest wall, and sheer within lights on his feet. As when a prowling wolf, whom hunger drives to seek new haunt for prey, watching where shepherds pen their flocks at eve, in hurdled coats amid the field secure, leaps over the fence with ease into the fold, or, as a thief, bent to unhoard the cash of some rich burgher, whose substantial doors cross-barred and bolted fast, fear no assault. In at the window climbs, or over the tiles, so clomb this first grand thief into God's fold. So since into his church lewd hirelings climb, thence up he flew, and on the tree of life, the middle tree and highest there that grew, sat like a cormorant, yet not true life thereby regained, but sat devising death to them who lived, nor on the virtue thought of that life-giving plant, but only used for prospect what well used had been the pledge of immortality. So little knows any but God alone to value right the good before him, but perverts best things to worst abuse, or to their meanest use. Beneath him with new wonder now he views, to all delight of human sense exposed, in narrow room, nature's whole wealth, ye more, a heaven on earth, for blissful paradise of God the garden was, by him in the east of Eden planted. Eden stretched her line, from Oran eastward, to the royal towers of great Seleucia, built by Grecian kings, or where the sons of Eden long before dwelt in Telasa. In this pleasant soil, his far more pleasant garden God ordained, out of the fertile ground he caused to grow all trees of noblest kind for sight, smell, taste, and all amid them stood the tree of life, high eminent, blooming ambrosial fruit, of vegetable gold, and next to life, our death. The tree of knowledge grew fast by knowledge of good, bought dear by knowing ill. Southward through Eden went a river large, nor changed his course, but through the shaggy hill passed underneath engulfed, for God had thrown that mountain as his garden mould high, raised upon the rapid current, which, through veins of porous earth with kindly thirst updrawn, rose a fresh fountain, and with many a rill watered the garden. Thence united fell down the steep glade and met the nether flood, which from his darksome passage now appears, and now, divided into 4 main streams, runs diverse, wandering many a famous realm and country, whereof here needs no account, but rather to tell how, if art could tell, how from that sapphire fount the crisped brooks, rolling on orient pearl and sands of gold, with mazy error under pendant shades, ran nectar, visiting each plant, and fed flowers worthy of paradise, which not nice art in beds and curious knots, but nature boon, poured forth profuse on hill and dale and plain, both where the morning sun first warmly smote the open field, and where the unpierced shade embrowned the noontide bowers. Thus was this place a happy rural seat, of various view, groves whose rich trees wept odorous gums and balm, others whose fruit, burnished with golden rind, hung amiable. Hesperian fables true, if true, here only, and of delicious taste, betwixt them lawns or level downs, and flocks grazing the tender herb, were interposed, or palmy hillock, or the flowery lap of some irriguous valley spread her store, flowers of all hue, and without thorn the rose. Another side, umbrageous grots and caves of cool recess, over which the mantling vine lays forth her purple grape, and gently creeps luxuriant. Meanwhile murmuring waters fall down the slope hills, dispersed, or in a lake, that to the fringed bank, with myrtle crowned, her crystal mirror holds, unite their streams. The birds their choir reply, airs, vernal airs, breathing the smell of field and grove, attune the trembling leaves, while universal Pan knit with the graces and the hours in dance, led on the eternal spring. Not that fair field of Aeneid, where Proserpine gathering flowers, herself a fairer flower by gloomy Dis was gathered, which cost Ceres all that pain to seek her through the world, nor that sweet grove of Daphne by Orontes, and the inspired Castilian spring might with this paradise of Eden strive, nor that Nisaean isle girt with the river Triton, where old Cham, whom Gentiles Ammon call, and Libyan Jove hid Amalthea and her florid son, young Bacchus, from his stepdame Rhea's eye, nor where Abassin kings their issue guard. Mount Amara, though this by some supposed true paradise under the Ethiop line by Nilus' head, enclosed with shining rock, a whole day's journey high, but wide remote from this Assyrian garden, where the fiend saw, undelighted, all delight, all kind of living creatures, new to sight, and strange too, of far nobler shape, erect and tall, godlike erect, with native honour, clad in naked majesty, seemed lords of all, and worthy seemed, for in their looks divine the image of their glorious Maker shone. Truth, wisdom, sanctitude severe and pure, severe but in true filial freedom placed, whence true authority in men, though both not equal as their sex, not equal seemed, for contemplation he, and valour formed, for softness she, and sweet attractive grace. He for God only, she for God in him, his fair large front and eye sublime declared, absolute rule and hyacinthine locks, round from his parted forelock manly hung clustering, but not beneath his shoulders broad, she, as a veil, down to the slender waist, her unadorned golden tresses wore dishevelled, but in wanton ringlets, waved as the vine curls her tendrils, which implied subjection, but required with gentle sway, and by her yielded, by him best received, yielded with coy submission, modest pride, and sweet, reluctant, amorous delay. Nor those mysterious parts were then concealed. Then was not guilty shame, dishonest shame of nature's works, honour dishonourable, sin bred. How have ye troubled all mankind with shows instead, mere shows of seeming pure, and banished from man's life his happiest life, simplicity and spotless innocence? So passed they naked on, nor shunned the sight of God or angel, for they thought no ill. So hand in hand they passed, the loveliest pair that ever since in love's embraces met. Adam, the goodliest man of men since born his sons, the fairest of her daughters, Eve. Under a tuft of shade that on a green stood whispering soft, by a fresh fountain side, they sat them down, and after no more toil of their sweet gardening labour, than sufficed to recommend cool zephyr, and made ease more easy, wholesome thirst and appetite more grateful, to their superfruits they fell, nectarine fruits, which the compliant boughs yielded them, sidelong as they sat recline on the soft downy bank, damasked with flowers. The savoury pulp they chew, and in the rind still, as they thirsted, scoop the brimming stream. Nor gentle purpose, nor endearing smiles wanted, nor youthful dalliance, as beseems fair couple, linked in happy nuptial league, alone as they. About them frisking played all beasts of the earth, since wild and of all chase, in wood or wilderness, forest or den, sporting the lion ramped, and in his paw dandled the kid. Bears, tigers, ounces, pards, gambolled before them. The unwieldy elephant, to make them mirth, used all his might, and reefed his lithe proboscis. Close the serpent sly, insinuating, wove with Gordian twine his braided train, and of his fatal guile gave proof unheeded. Others on the grass couched, and now, filled with pasture gazing sat, or bedward ruminating, for the sun, declined, was hasting now, with prone career, to the ocean isles, and in the ascending scale of heaven the stars that usher evening rose, when Satan still in gaze, as first he stood, scarce thus at length, failed speech recovered sad. O hell, what do mine eyes with grief behold? Into our room of bliss, thus high advanced creatures of other mould, earth-born perhaps, not spirits, yet to heavenly spirits bright, little inferior, whom my thoughts pursue with wonder, and could love, so lively shines in them divine resemblance, and such grace the hand that formed them on their shape hath poured. Ah, gentle pair, ye little think how nigh your change approaches, when all these delights will vanish, and deliver ye to woe, more woe, the more your taste is now of joy, happy, but for so happy ill secured long to continue, and this high seat your heaven ill fenced for heaven to keep out such a foe as now is entered. Yet no purposed foe to you, whom I could pity thus forlorn, though I unpitied, league with you I seek, and mutual amity, so straight, so close, that I with you must dwell, or you with me henceforth, my darling haply may not please. Like this fair paradise, your sense, yet such accept your Maker's work, he gave it to me, which I as freely give. Hell shall unfold to entertain you to her widest gates, and send forth all her kings. There will be room, not like these narrow limits, to receive your numerous offspring, if no better place. Thank him who puts me loath to this revenge, on you who wrong me not for him who wronged. And should I at your harmless innocence melt, as I do, yet public reason just, honour and empire with revenge enlarged, by conquering this new world, compels me now to do what else, though damned, I should abhor. So spake the fiend, and with necessity the tyrant's plea excused his devilish deeds. Then, from his lofty stand on that high tree, down he alights among the sportful herd of those four-footed kinds, himself now one, now other, as their shape served best, his end, nearer to view his prey, and unespied, to mark what of their state he more might learn, by word or action marked. About them round a lion now he stalks with fiery glare. Then as a tiger who by chance hath spied in some purlieu two gentle fawns at play, straight couches close, then rising, changes oft his countenance watch, as one who chose his ground, whence rushing, he might surest seize them both, gripped in each paw, when Adam first of men, to first of women Eve, thus moving speech, turned him an ear to hear new utterance flow. Sole partner, and sole part, of all these joys, dearer thyself than all, needs must the power that made us, and for us this ample world, be infinitely good, and of his good as liberal and free as infinite, that raised us from the dust, and placed us here, in all this happiness, who, at his hand, have nothing merited, nor can perform aught whereof he hath need. He who requires from us no other service than to keep this one, this easy charge, of all the trees in the paradise that bear delicious fruit, so to taste that only tree of knowledge, planted by the tree of life. So near grows death to life, whatever death is, some dreadful thing no doubt, for well thou knowest God hath pronounced it death, to taste that tree. The only sign of our obedience left, among so many signs of power and rule conferred upon us, and dominion given over all other creatures that possess earth, air, and sea. Then let us not think hard one easy prohibition, who enjoy free leave so large to all things else, and choice unlimited of manifold delights. But let us ever praise him, and extol his bounty, following our delightful task, to prune these growing plants, and tend these flowers, which, were it toilsome, yet with thee were sweet. To whom thus Eve replied, O thou for whom and from whom I was formed, flesh of thy flesh, and without whom am I to no end, my guide and head. What thou hast said is just and right, for we to him indeed all praises owe, and daily thanks I chiefly, who enjoy so far the happier lot, enjoying thee preeminent by so much odds, while thou like consort to thyself canst nowhere find. That day I oft remember, when from sleep I first awaked, and found myself reposed under a shade of flowers, much wondering where and what I was, whence thither brought, and how? Not distant far from thence a murmuring sound of waters issued from a cave, and spread into a liquid plain, then stood unmoved, pure as the expanse of heaven. I thither went with unexperienced thought, and laid me down on the green bank to look into the clear, smooth lake that to me seemed another sky. As I bent down to look, just opposite a shape within the watery gleam appeared. Bending to look on me, I started back. It started back, but pleased I soon returned. Pleased it returned as soon as with answering looks of sympathy, and there I had fixed mine eyes till now, and pined with vain desire. Had not a voice thus warned me, what thou seest, what there thou seest, fair creature, is thyself. With thee it came and goes, but follow me, and I will bring thee where no shadow stays, thy coming, and thy soft embraces. He whose image thou art, him thou shalt enjoy inseparably thine. To him shalt bear multitudes like thyself, and thence be called Mother of human race. What could I do but follow straight, invisibly thus led, till I espied thee, fair indeed and tall, under a platane, yet methought less fair, less winning soft, less amiably mild, than that smooth watery image. Back I turned, thou following, criedst aloud, Return, fair Eve, whom fliest thou? Whom thou fliest, of whom thou art. His flesh, his bone, to give thee being I lent out of my side to thee, nearest my heart. Substantial life, to have thee by my side. Henceforth, an individual solace dear, part of my soul I seek thee, and thee claim my other half. With that thy gentle hand ceased mine, I yielded, and from that time see how beauty is excelled by manly grace, and wisdom, which alone is truly fair. So spake our general mother, and with eyes of conjugal attraction unreproved, and meek surrender, half embracing, leaned on our first father. Half her swelling breast naked met his, under the flowing gold of her loose tresses hid. He, in delight both of her beauty and submissive charms, smiled with superior love, as Jupiter on Juno smiles when he impregns the clouds that shed mayflowers, and pressed her matron lip with kisses pure. Aside the devil turned for envy, yet with jealous leer malign eyed them askance, and to himself thus plained, Sight hateful, sight tormenting, thus these two, imparadised in one another's arms, the happier Eden, shall enjoy their fill of bliss on bliss, while I to hell am thrust, where neither joy nor love, but fierce desire, among our other torments, not the least, still unfulfilled with pain of longing pines. Yet let me not forget what I have gained from their own mouths. All is not theirs, it seems. One fatal tree there stands, of knowledge called, forbidden them to taste. Knowledge forbidden, suspicious, reasonless. Why should their Lord envy them that? Can it be sin to know? Can it be death? And do they only stand by ignorance? Is that their happy state? The proof of their obedience and their faith? O fair foundation laid whereon to build their ruin! Hence I will excite their minds with more desire to know, and to reject envious commands, invented with design to keep them low, whom knowledge might exalt equal with gods, aspiring to be such. They taste and die. What likelier can ensue, but first with narrow search I must walk round this garden, and no corner leave unspied. A chance but chance may lead where I may meet some wandering spirit of heaven by fountain side, or in thick shade retired, from him to draw what further would be learned. Live while ye may, yet happy pair enjoy, till I return. Short pleasures, for long woes are to succeed. So saying, his proud step he scornful turned, but with sly circumspection, and began, through wood, through waste, over hill, over dale, his roam. Meanwhile, in utmost longitude, where heaven with earth and ocean meets, and setting sun slowly descended, and with right aspect against the eastern gate of paradise levelled his evening rays. It was a rock of alabaster, piled up to the clouds, conspicuous far, winding with one ascent, accessible from earth, one entrance high. The rest was craggy cliff that overhung, still as it rose, impossible to climb. Betwixt these rocky pillars Gabriel sat, chief of the angelic guards, awaiting night. About him exercised heroic games the unarmed youth of heaven, but nigh at hand celestial armoury, shields, helms, and spears, hung high with diamond flaming and with gold. Thither came Uriel, gliding through the even on a sunbeam, swift as a shooting star. In autumn thwarts the night, when vapours fired impress the air, and shows the mariner from what point of his compass to beware impetuous winds. He thus began in haste. Gabriel, to thee thy course by lot hath given charge and strict watch, that to this happy place no evil thing approach or enter in. This day, at height of noon, came to my sphere a spirit, zealous as he seemed, to know more of the Almighty's works, and chiefly man. God's latest image, I described his way, bent all on speed, and marked his airy gait. But in the mount that lies from Eden north, where he first lighted, soon discerned his looks, alien from heaven, with passions foul obscured. Mine eye pursued him still, but under shade lost sight of him. One of the banished crew, I fear, hath ventured from the deep, to raise new troubles. Him thy care must be to find. To whom the winged warrior thus returned. Uriel, no wonder if thy perfect sight, amid the sun's bright circle, where thou sitst, see far and wide, in at this gate none pass. The vigilance here placed, but such as come well known from heaven, and since meridian hour no creature thence. If spirit of other sort, so minded, have overleaped these earthly bounds on purpose, hard thou knowest it to exclude spiritual substance with corporal bar. But if within the circuit of these walks, in whatsoever shape he lurk, of whom thou tellest, by morrow dawning I shall know. So promised he, and Uriel to his charge returned on that bright beam, whose point now raised bore him, slope downward to the sun, now fallen beneath the Azores, whether the prime orb, incredible how swift, had thither rolled, diurnal, or this less voluble earth, by shorter flight to the east, had left him there, arraying with reflected purple and gold the clouds that on his western throne attend. Now came still evening on, and twilight grey had in her sober livery all things clad. Silence accompanied, for beast and bird. They to their grassy couch, these to their nests were slunk, all but the wakeful nightingale. She all night long her amorous descant sung. Silence was pleased. Now glowed the firmament with living sapphires. Hesperus, that led the starry host, rode brightest, till the moon, rising in clouded majesty, at length apparent queen unveiled her peerless light, and over the dark her silver mantle threw. When Adam thus to Eve, fair consort, the hour of night, and all things now retired to rest, mind us of like repose, since God hath set labour and rest, as day and night, to men, successive, and the timely dew of sleep, now falling with soft, slumberous weight, inclines our eyelids. Other creatures all day long rove idle, unemployed, and less need rest. Man hath his daily work of body or mind appointed, which declares his dignity and the regard of heaven on all his ways, while other animals unactive range, and of their doings God takes no account. Tomorrow, ere fresh morning streak the east, with first approach of light, we must be risen, and at our pleasant labour to reform yon flowery arbours yonder, alleys green, our walk at noon, with branches overgrown, that mock our scant manuring, and require more hands than ours to lop their wanton growth. Those blossoms also, and those dropping gums, that lie bestrown unsightly and unsmooth, ask riddance, if we mean to tread with ease. Meanwhile, as nature wills, night bids us rest, to whom thus Eve, with perfect beauty adorned, my author and disposer, what thou bidst unargued I obey. So God ordains. God is thy law, thou mine. To know no more is woman's happiest knowledge, and her praise. With thee conversing I forget all time, all seasons, and their change. All please alike. Sweet is the breath of morn, her rising sweet, with charm of earliest birds. Pleasant the sun, when first on this delightful land he spreads his orient beams on herb, tree, fruit, and flower. Glistering with dew, fragrant the fertile earth after soft showers, and sweet the coming on of grateful evening mild. Then silent night, with this her solemn bird, and this fair moon, and these the gems of heaven, her starry train, but neither breath of morn, when she ascends with charm of earliest birds, nor rising sun on this delightful land, nor herb, fruit, flower, glistering with dew, nor fragrance after showers, nor grateful evening mild, nor silent night, with this her solemn bird, nor walk by moon, or glittering starlight, without thee is sweet. But wherefore all night long shine these? For whom this glorious sight, when sleep hath shut all eyes? To whom our general ancestor replied, Daughter of God and man, accomplished Eve, these have their course to finish round the earth. By morrow evening, and from land to land, in order, thou to nations yet unborn, ministering light prepared, they set and rise, lest total darkness should, by night, regain her old possession, and extinguish life in nature and all things, which these soft fires not only enlighten, but, with kindly heat of various influence, foment and warm. Temper or nourish, or in part shed down their stellar virtue on all kinds that grow on earth, made hereby apter to receive perfection from the sun's more potent ray. These then, though unbeheld in deep of night, shine not in vain, nor think, though men were none, that heaven would want spectators, God want praise. Millions of spiritual creatures walk the earth unseen, both when we wake and when we sleep. All these with ceaseless praise his works behold, both day and night. How often from the steep of echoing hill or thicket have we heard celestial voices to the midnight air, soul or responsive each to other's note, singing their great Creator. Oft in bands while they keep watch or nightly rounding walk, with heavenly touch of instrumental sounds, in full harmonic number joined, their songs divide the night, and lift our thoughts to heaven. Thus talking, hand in hand alone they passed on to their blissful bower. It was a place chosen by the sovereign planter when he framed all things to man's delightful use. The roof of thickest covert was inwoven shade, laurel and myrtle, and what higher grew of firm and fragrant leaf. On either side, acanthus, and each odorous bushy shrub. Fenced up the verdant wall, each beauteous flower, iris all hues, roses and jessamine, reared high their flourished heads between, and wrought mosaic underfoot the violet, crocus, and hyacinth, with rich inlay broidered the ground, more coloured than with stone of costliest emblem. Other creature here, bird, beast, insect, or worm, durst enter none, such was their awe of man. In shadier bower, more sacred and sequestered, though but feigned, Pan or Sylvanus never slept, nor nymph, nor Faunus haunted. Here, in close recess, with flowers, garlands, and sweet-smelling herbs, espoused Eve decked first her nuptial bed, and heavenly choirs the Hymenaean sung. What day the genial angel to our sire brought her in naked beauty, more adorned, more lovely than Pandora, whom the gods endowed with all their gifts, and oh, too like in sad event, when to the unwiser son of Japhet, brought by Hermes, she ensnared mankind with her fair looks, to be avenged on him who had stole Jove's authentic fire. Thus, at their shady lodge arrived, both stood, both turned, and under open sky adored the god that made both sky, air, earth, and heaven, which they beheld, the moon's resplendent globe, and starry pole. Thou also madest the night, Maker omnipotent, and thou the day, which we, in our appointed work employed, have finished. Happy in our mutual help and mutual love, the crown of all our bliss, ordained by thee, and this delicious place, for us too large, where thy abundance wants partakers, and uncropped falls to the ground. But thou hast promised from us to a race, to fill the earth, who shall with us extol thy goodness infinite, both when we wake and when we seek, as now thy gift of sleep. This sad unanimous and other rites observing none, but adoration pure, which God likes best, into their inmost bower handed they went, and eased the putting off these troublesome disguises, which we wear. Straight side by side were laid, nor turned, I ween, Adam from his fair spouse, nor Eve the rites mysterious of connubial love refused. Whatever hypocrites austerely talk of purity and place and innocence, defaming as impure what God declares pure, and commands to some, leaves free to all. Our Maker bids increase, who bids abstain, but our destroyer, foe to God and man. Hail, wedded love, mysterious law, true source of human offspring, sole propriety, in paradise of all things common else. By thee adulterous lust was driven from men among the bestial herds to range, by thee founded in reason, loyal, just, and pure, relations dear, and all the charities of father, son, and brother, first were known. Far be it that I should write thee sin or blame, or think thee unbefitting holiest place, perpetual fountain of domestic sweets, whose bed is undefiled and chaste pronounced, present or past, as saints and patriarchs used. Of his golden shafts employed, here lights his constant lamp, and waves his purple wings, reigns here and revels not in the bought smile of harlots, loveless, joyless, unendeared, casual fruition, nor in court armours, mixed dance, or wanton mask, or midnight ball, or serenade, which the starved lover sings to his proud fair, best quitted with disdain. These, lulled by nightingales, embracing slept, and on their naked limbs the flowery roof showered roses, which the morn repaired. Sleep on, blessed pair, and oh, yet happiest, if ye seek no happier state, and know to know no more. Now had night measured with her shadowy cone halfway uphill this vast sublunar vault, and from their ivory port the cherubim, forth issuing at the accustomed hour, stood armed to their night watches in warlike parade, when Gabriel, to his next in power, thus spake. Uziel, half these draw off, and coast the south with strictest watch. These other wheel the north, our circuit meets full west. As flame they part, half wheeling to the shield, half to the spear. From these 2 strong and subtle spirits he called, that near him stood, and gave them thus in charge. Ithuriel and Zephon, with winged speed, search through this garden, leave unsearched no nook, but chiefly where those 2 fair creatures lodge, now laid perhaps asleep, secure of harm. This evening, from the sun's decline arrived, who tells of some infernal spirit seen hitherward bent, who could have thought, escaped the bars of hell, on errand bad no doubt, such where ye find, seize fast, and hither bring. So saying, on he led his radiant files, dazzling the moon, these to the bower direct in search of whom they sought. Him there they found squat like a toad, close at the ear of Eve, essaying by his devilish art to reach the organs of her fancy, and with them forge illusions as he list, phantasms and dreams, or if, inspiring venom, he might taint the animal spirits that from pure blood arise like gentle breaths from rivers pure, thence raise at least distempered, discontented thoughts, vain hopes, vain aims, inordinate desires, blown up with high conceits, engendering pride. Him thus intent, Ithuriel with his spear touched lightly, for no falsehood can endure touch of celestial temper, but returns of force to its own likeness. Up he starts discovered and surprised, as when a spark lights on a heap of nitrous powder, laid fit for the ton, some magazine to store against a rumoured war, the smutty grain, with sudden blaze diffused, inflames the air. So started up in his own shape the fiend. Back stepped those 2 fair angels, half amazed, so sudden to behold the grisly king, yet thus unmoved with fear, accost him soon. Which of those rebel spirits adjudged to hell comest thou, escaped thy prison? And transformed, why satst thou like an enemy in wait, here watching at the head of these that sleep? Know ye not then, said Satan, filled with scorn, know ye not me? Ye knew me once no mate for you, there sitting where ye durst not soar. Not to know me argues yourself unknown, the lowest of your throng, or, if ye know, why ask ye, and superfluous begin your message, like to end as much in vain? To whom thus Zephon answering scorn with scorn, think not, revolted spirit, thy shape the same, or undiminished brightness, to be known, as when thou stoodest in heaven upright and pure. That glory then, when thou no more wast good, departed from thee, and thou resemblest now thy sin and place of doom obscure and foul. But come, for thou, be sure, shalt give account to him who sent us, whose charge is to keep this place inviolable, and these from harm. So spake the cherub, and his grave rebuke, severe in youthful beauty, added grace invincible. Abashed the devil stood, and felt how awful goodness is, and saw virtue in her shape, how lovely, saw and pined his loss, but chiefly to find here observed his lustre visibly impaired, yet seemed undaunted. If I must contend, said he, best with the best, the sender, not the sent, or, all at once, more glory will be won, or less be lost. Thy fear, said Zephon bold, will save us trial, what the least can do, single against thee, wicked, and thence weak. The fiend replied not, overcome with rage, but like a proud steed reined, went haughty on, champing his iron curb, to strive or fly, he held it vain, or from above had quailed his heart, not else dismayed. Now drew they nigh the western point, where those half-rounding guards just met, and closing stood in squadron joined, awaiting next command. To whom their chief, Gabriel, from the front thus called aloud, O friends, I hear the tread of nimble feet, hasting this way, and now by glimpse discern Ithuriel and Zephon through the shade, and with them comes a third of regal port, but faded splendour wan, who by his gait and fierce demeanour seems the prince of hell, not likely to part hence without contest. Stand firm, for in his look defiance lours. He scarce had ended, when those two approached, and brief related whom they brought, were found how busied, in what form and posture couched. To whom with stern regard thus Gabriel spake, Why hast thou, Satan, broke the bounds prescribed to my transgressions, and disturbed the charge of others, who approve not to transgress by thy example, but have power and right to question thy bold entrance on this place, employed, it seems, to violate sleep, and those whose dwelling God hath planted here in bliss. To whom thus Satan with contemptuous brow, Gabriel, thou hadst in heaven the esteem of wise, and such I held thee, but this question asked puts me in doubt. Lives there who loves his pain, who would not, finding way, break loose from hell, though thither doomed? Thou wouldst thyself, no doubt, and boldly venture to whatever place farthest from pain, where thou mightst hope to change torment with ease, and soonest recompense dole and delight, which in this place I sought. To thee no reason, who knowest only good, but evil hast not tried, and wilt object his will who bounds us. Let him surer bar his iron gates, if he intends our stay in that dark durance. Thus much what was asked. The rest is true. They found me where they say, but that implies not violence or harm. Thus he in scorn. The warlike angel moved, disdainfully half smiling, thus replied, O loss of one in heaven to judge of wise since Satan fell, whom folly overthrew, and now returns him from his person scaped, gravely in doubt whether to hold them wise or not, who ask what boldness brought him hither unlicensed from his bounds in hell prescribed. So wise he judges it to fly from pain, however, and to escape his punishment. So judge thou still, presumptuous, till the wrath which thou incurrest by flying meet thy flight sevenfold, and scourge that wisdom back to hell, which taught thee yet no better, that no pain can equal anger infinite provoked. But wherefore thou alone? Wherefore with thee came not all hell broke loose? Is pain to them less pain, less to be fled? Or thou than they less hardy to endure? Courageous chief, the first in flight from pain, hadst thou alleged to thy deserted host this cause of flight? Thou surely hadst not come sole fugitive, to which the fiend thus answered, frowning stern, not that I less endure or shrink from pain, insulting angel, well thou knowest I stood thy fiercest, when in battle to thy aid, the blasting volleyed thunder made all speed, and seconded thy else not dreaded spear. But still thy words at random, as before, argue thy inexperience what behooves from hard essays and ill successes past. A faithful leader, not to hazard all through ways of danger by himself untried. I, therefore, I alone first undertook to wing the desolate abyss, and spy this new created world, whereof in hell fame is not silent, here in hope to find better abode, and my afflicted powers, to settle here on earth, or in mid-air, though for possession put to try once more what thou and thy gay legions dare against, whose easier business were to serve their Lord high up in heaven, with songs to him his throne, and practised distances to cringe, not flight, to whom the warrior angel soon replied, to say and straight unsay, pretending first wise to fly pain, professing next to spy, argues no leader but a liar traced, Satan. And couldst thou faithful add? O name, O sacred name of faithfulness profaned, faithful to whom? To thy rebellious crew? Army of fiends, fit body to fit head, was this your discipline and faith engaged, your military obedience to dissolve allegiance to the acknowledged power supreme? And thou, sly hypocrite, who now would seem patron of liberty, who more than thou once formed, and cringed, and servilely adored heaven's awful monarch, wherefore but in hope to dispossess him, and thyself to reign? But mark what I ard thee now, avaunt, fly neither whence thou fledst. If from this hour within these hallowed limits thou appear, back to the infernal pit I drag thee chained, and seal thee so, as henceforth not to scorn the facile gates of hell, too slightly barred. So threatened he, but Satan to no threats gave heed, but waxing more in rage replied, Then when I am thy captive talk of chains, proud limitary cherub, but ere then far heavier load thyself expect to feel from my prevailing arm, though heaven's king ride on thy wings, and thou with thy compeers, used to the yoke, drawest his triumphant wheels in progress through the road of heaven star-paved. While thus he spake, the angelic squadron bright turned fiery red, sharpening in mooned horns their phalanx, and began to hem him round with ported spears, as thick as when a field of cereals ripe for harvest waving bends her bearded grove of ears, which way the wind sways them, the careful ploughman doubting stands. Left on the threshing floor his hopeless sheaves prove chaff. On the other side Satan, alarmed, collecting all his might, dilated stood, like Tenerife or Atlas unremoved. His stature reached the sky, and on his crest sat horror plumed, nor wanted in his grasp what seemed both spear and shield. Now dreadful deeds might have ensued, nor only paradise in his commotion, but the starry cope of heaven perhaps, or all the elements, at least, had gone to rack, disturbed the torn with violence of this conflict, had not soon the Eternal, to prevent such horrid fray, hung forth in heaven his golden scales, yet seen betwixt Astrea and the Scorpion sign, wherein all things created first he weighed. The pendulous round earth with balanced air in counterpoise now ponders all events, battles and realms, in these he put two weights, the sequel each of parting and of fight. The latter quick up flew and kicked the beam, which Gabriel spying thus bespake the fiend. Satan, I know thy strength, and thou knowest mine, neither our own, but given. What folly then to boast what arms can do, since thine no more than heaven permits, nor mine, though doubled now, to trample thee as mire. For proof, look up, and read thy lot in yon celestial sign, where thou art weighed, and shown how light, how weak, if thou resist. The fiend looked up, and knew his mounted scale aloft, no more, but fled murmuring, and with him fled the shades of night.